Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, July 16, 2024 regular business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with council members Cooper and partially excused this evening. So before we move on to adoption of the agenda, I do just want to make a few comments about what happened this weekend in our nation, which is the attempted assassination of a former president of the United States. And this is something that obviously I strongly condemn, we strongly condemn as elected officials here at the local level. And we certainly know that this is something that concerns a lot of members of our community. The increased amount of insightful rhetoric from public officials, also from just ordinary community members, is something that we strongly condemn, and we encourage members of our community to please be thoughtful in your comments. I do just want to mention that in 2021, the National League of Cities released a report that was titled "On the Front Lines of Today's Cities: Trauma, Challenges, and Solutions." And the findings in that report said that 87% of local officials surveyed observed an increase in attacks on public officials in recent years, while 81% reported having experienced harassment, threats, or violence themselves. So this is something that is extremely concerning, obviously, to all of us for reasons that are very, very concerning. And frankly, the fish rots from the head. We've seen this type of rhetoric at the national level, and it's working its way down to the local level. And so I do just, again, strongly encourage our community to speak up and condemn any type of violent rhetoric or violent action, and we would appreciate your participation along with us here on the dais. So with that, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have an agenda. So first item this evening is item 2A, which is special recognition, a proclamation recognizing July as National Parks, Arts, and Recreation Month. And here to present this evening on that is our Director of Parks, Arts, and Recreation, our Director, Paul Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. It's an honor to be here tonight. For the record, Paul Simmons, Parks, Arts, and Recreation Director. And it's an incredible honor to serve as this city's the Director of Parks, Arts, and Recreation. There's not a lot of staff from our department. We do have Diane here from our park engineering team. Not a lot of staff here tonight, and that's on purpose. This is our busiest time of year, particularly in this heat. Our staff work 7 days a week, 365 days a year, keeping our parks open and clean and available and our programs running. And so if folks aren't working at this moment, I want them resting and spending time with their families and that sort of thing. So I am here tonight, and I so appreciate the opportunity to highlight the great work our department does on behalf of the city and the community. You regularly hear from me. I end up being the face of our department quite often in meetings and at public events and up here at the dais as we do our business. But I can tell you that the real work of our department happens at the front lines. It happens with the staff who are out delivering the services day to day. It's our day camp leaders. It's our seasonal maintenance workers. It's our public service representatives, our park rangers. It's our park rovers that are up first thing in the morning to open the bathrooms and are the last ones to go home, closing the bathrooms. It's the folks that keep the ball fields lined, the landscaping and facilities crews, the folks at the Armory, the Olympia Center staff, our class instructors, and our engineers and our planners. The list goes on and on. We have our equity staff and our cultural event staff, and I can tell you day in and day out, they give everything they have to try and provide the best services possible. Our core purpose as a department is to enrich lives by connecting people with quality experiences. We lead with our values, which are dedicated, inclusive, responsive, respectful, innovative, and fun. And we continue to build a park system that features 54 properties, over 1,400 acres, 23 and a half miles of 12 playgrounds and 2 spray grounds. We have an incredible community that supports us with over 7,700 volunteer hours through our park stewardship program. We produce 4 seasonal recreation brochures that highlight hundreds of classes for all ages and all abilities. A few years ago, we lost a longtime employee, Ina Fennell. She was a 30-plus year employee, and she left to the city behind an incredible gift that has allowed us to take our annual scholarship from just a couple $1,000s a year to over $20,000 a year that we're giving out to youth and families. We have over 9,700 folks that participate in our recreation programs, and we've built a cultural event series that features 5 partnered events, and then we also have a series of other events that we sponsor and support a little bit more from a distance. Our community loves parks so much that they've passed 2 voted measures to ensure that parks, arts, and recreation services have stable and predictable funding. This public support is deeply appreciated, but it also comes with incredible responsibility to deliver on the promises and the expectations of the community. And our staff take that responsibility very seriously and work day in and day out to try and meet those expectations, and in many cases exceed where possible. Those funds have allowed us to do some incredible things. We actually, and it starts with taking care of what you have first. Through those funding sources, we're able to invest over $1 million annually into our camp, which is our major maintenance, and our ADA facility upgrades, as well as our Percival Landing repairs. This is essentially allowing us to rebuild our park system from the inside out. Many of our facilities are still the original facilities that were built 30, 40, 50, and even 60 years ago in some cases. And slowly but surely, since the passage of the Metropolitan Park District, we've been able to go through and replace 40-year-old ball field lights and resurface sport courts and replace playgrounds. And it's been incredible to watch the progress over time, and we're excited to see that continue as our system continues to grow and age. It also gives the ability to pursue new projects and meet the growth of the community. Our community has grown quite a bit, and even the 10 years I've been here, and is expected to grow significantly over the next 20 years. Last week, you all approved acceptance of a bid at Grass Lake Nature Park. Here's a couple pictures and renderings of what that project will look like. I'll also say the voted measure provides us with match to aggressively pursue state and federal matching funds, and we've received close to 30 grants over the last 6 or 7 years, and pulled in about $10 to $12 million of state and federal money to help supplement the local dollars that are provided by our community. Here's another project that's many years in the making, the Kaiser Woods Park improvements, which will have our first mountain bike facilities, as well as many hiking and biking trails. This is located adjacent to the Ken Lake neighborhood in southwest Olympia. Yelm Highway Community Park has been in the works for many, many years. As many people know, our park system doesn't have a single soccer field, and that's been a long-standing community need, highlighted in I think at least 4 versions of our Parks, Arts, and Recreation Plan update, and we purchased the Yelm Highway property in 2018 and have continued to work to develop a vision for that property with the community. Here are just a couple renderings for what that will eventually look like and feature. With this funding, we've been able to provide Oli on Ice for the last 5 years, which is becoming a holiday favorite and a tradition for many families in the community. It takes a place that, and typically in those months, it would be pretty cold, dark, and wet, and it lights it up with life and happiness and draws people into our downtown. We're very excited to continue that. Our day camps typically sell out like concert tickets. The first Saturday in March is when our summer day camps open up, and literally I'm a parent, and some people just think that because I'm the director of the department I get special treatment, and that's not the case. I am out there just like I am when I try to go to a show, trying to get my kids into camp just like everybody else in the community, and we often find ourselves on a couple of wait lists because it always seems like there's a couple that we don't get into. But we have some incredible camp staff and day camp leaders that work really hard and have developed a strong reputation for providing a safe place for kids to learn and grow together. For a number of years, we've been contracting with the Bridge Music Project, which goes in and actively works in our middle schools. They're doing some incredible work in our community to reach kids that our traditional programs don't necessarily reach. They target foster youth, incarcerated youth, homeless youth, and teach them to deal with life's problems through music, both songwriting and performing. And at the end of many of their programs, they get a chance to go into a studio and record a song, and then they usually do some showcase performances to showcase those. And that's been an incredible partnership for us as a Parks Department and for the Bridge, but more importantly for the youth that program is serving and continues to serve. Like Yelm Highway, we're also very excited about the Armory Creative Campus. We've also been longing for an arts center for 30 years and many plans and documents, and with the incredible generous gift from the state and our support of our state legislators and city council over the past few years, we are moving towards phase 1 reconstruction, which will hopefully be starting early next year. Here's another picture of some of the renderings for that project. Arts Walk continues to be one of our great traditions. As part of the Parks, Arts, and Recreation Department, former Mayor Selby used to bring that up every time we would do a presentation and we would talk about the parks and the recreation, and she was really known for also highlighting the arts and the incredible work that happens within the arts community. With our traffic box wraps, our poet laureate, the Percival Plinths, which, by the way, this is voting month. There's a new set of plinths down on Percival Landing, so if you haven't voted, you have until July 30th. You vote through engageolympia.com. You can go on and vote for your favorite. I actually voted this morning. So again, some people think maybe because I'm the director I have extra influence. No, I vote just like everybody else. Our cultural event series started a few years ago with the Juneteenth celebration in 2021 and has expanded significantly. We now are hosting Indigenous Peoples Day with the Squaxin Island Tribe, Lula Fest, which is Hispanic Heritage Month in September, which is coming up. We just finished our Juneteenth celebration a couple of weeks ago. We had our Asian American Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian event in May, and then our Black History Month in February. We also sponsor and support the Pride Festival. We support the Latinx Youth Summit, and we'll also be supporting the Festival of the Chas that's coming in August to Heritage Park. Here's a couple images from some of the different events that we've recently hosted. I was trying to find the video of the mayor doing the double dutch at Juneteenth, and unfortunately I wasn't able to pull that off, but perhaps we'll bring that at a future presentation. So I just want to highlight the theme of NRPA's Parks, Arts, and Recreation Month, which is where you belong. And when I think of our park system and our recreation programs and the services and the art and everything that we do for the community, my most sincere hope is that everyone in our community feels like they belong in our parks, programs, and services. And we hope that sentiment then extends to belonging here in Olympia. We take that responsibility very seriously within our department, and we hope that we're rolling out the red carpet to everyone in the community so that everyone knows that this is a place where you can come, you can enjoy the outdoors, you can enjoy recreation programs, you can build community together and be a part of what we're trying to do here. So thanks again for allowing me to highlight July as Parks, Arts, and Recreation Month, and we just appreciate your support as council members and the community's support and everything that allows us to do what we do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Don't go away yet, because we have a reading of the proclamation.
Oh, right.
Yes, which will be read by Councilmember Gilman.
To show our appreciation, we have 9 whereases and a resolution. Whereas Parks, Arts, and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the city of Olympia. And whereas Parks, Arts, and Recreation promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks, Arts, and Recreation has the opportunity to create a sense of belonging for all who engage in our service and facilities. And whereas Parks, Arts, and Recreation positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being. and reduce illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks, Arts, and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, fitness programs, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas our community has consistently and graciously supported parks, arts, and recreation services through 2 voted measures and active fee-based participation in our programs and services. And whereas parks, arts, and recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community and serves as critical infrastructure necessary for advancing climate goals. And whereas the United States House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Olympia recognizes the benefits derived from parks, arts, and recreation resources, now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Olympia City Council does hereby proclaim July as Parks, Arts, and Recreation Month in the City of Olympia, signed in the City of Olympia on the 16th day of July 24, Dante Payne, Mayor for the Olympia City Council.
Thank you. All right, and now I have the proclamation here to present you with.
Good job, Clark. Wait a second.
All right, any comments from the dais? Just gratitude to you, Paul, and to our entire Parks, Arts, and Recreation staff. Thank you all so much. All right, so we will move on to public comment this evening. It looks like we have a few folks signed up in person as well as online.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
There's one online participant.
All right, so before we get into that, just a few housekeeping items. So there is a clock to my right, your left. You have 2 minutes for your comments. As you approach the podium, you'll see that there's a box there with a green light, a yellow, and red lights. The green light indicating that your time has begun, the yellow light indicating that you have about 30 seconds remaining in your comments, and the red light indicating that your time has expired. If you don't finish your comments, feel free to email them to the council. We are in an election year, so please refrain from expressing your support or opposition to a candidate or ballot measure. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So starting with in-person public comment, we have Jacob Kosteka, followed by Ekaterina Henyon, followed by Justin Taylor. So as you're ready, go ahead and make your way to the stand. And once you begin, the clock will begin.
Thank you very much. It's hard to follow that great presentation. I advocate for more spray grounds. And now on to my presentation. My name is Jacob Kosteka. I'm a registered nurse here in Olympia. I am a certified critical care nurse, and I've worked in critical care for 15 years and currently work in post-anesthesia recovery for the past 3 years. I'm here to advocate for the decriminalization of psychedelic entheogens. I'm also certified in psychedelic therapy and research from California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. That's a graduate psychology school there. And that was a postgraduate training for medical professionals and psychology-related professionals. For about 2 years now, Jefferson County, which includes Forks, Port Townsend, has decriminalized psilocybin and other plant entheogens. We have not seen debauchery on the streets. And Colorado also has decriminalized, as has Oregon. The entire nation of Australia has decriminalized and made legal, actually, fungal entheogens and additionals for use with psychotherapy. This is all related to the decades-long evidence that we have been working through research to show that these are safe and effective tools to use with PTSD and depression. So U.S. drug policy has really kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. These are not opiates. These are safe, effective materials that should be available for people to use. I advocate because I do believe that there should be a medicalized model, and that by doing the groundwork here, we can pressure the state to develop that model. Our legislature has tried to bring that up already, and it has been vetoed by the governor. It's time that we pressure the state because they won't do that on their own. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please refrain from applause, just so the Mayor Pro Tem can call the next person forward and we can keep the public comment moving along. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ekaterina Hanian, and I have the privilege of calling Olympia my home for the past 6 years. I'm an immigrant, a business owner, a proud member of Thurston County Chamber of Commerce, as well as a mother of 2 incredible children, a devout wife, and a loving daughter. In addition to these roles, I serve on the board of New Horizons, formerly known as Quixote Communities, where we provide recovery-based housing for veterans and individuals experiencing homelessness. Today, I'm here to express my wholehearted support for the resolution to decriminalize entheogens in Olympia, as proposed by the council. Over the past year, leading this initiative has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. I have met so many amazing individuals within our community and beyond who are knowledgeable, compassionate, and committed to supporting one another on their personal journey. My deep dive into understanding human needs, economic development, and spiritual healing through psychosynthesis and psychedelics, especially psilocybin, has profoundly shaped my perspective. Psilocybin in particular has shown to be immense potential in providing relief from depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other mental health challenges. For me, it has been a source of higher consciousness in my personal development, allowing me to become a better mother, wife, and a community member in this human experience. This issue goes beyond personal healing. It's about human rights and sovereignty. It's about recognizing our right to explore our own consciousness and take control of our mental health. The government has a responsibility to protect its people, and sometimes that means supporting grassroots movements that hospitals and institutions won't champion. This is a movement driven by the people, for the people. I've discussed the benefits and implications of entheogens with therapists, pharmacists, police officers, veterans, professionals of behavioral hospitals, members of Thurston County Chamber, attorneys, Washington State senators and House representatives, my neighbors, family, and friends. Across these conversations, a common theme emerges. The initiative is necessary for the well-being of our community. I urge you to vote yes for this decriminalization as it supports our overall mental health and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Justin Taylor, followed by Patrick Seifert, followed by Jeff Lording.
Good evening. My name is Justin Taylor. I'm an Olympia resident, social services professional, and advocate for the resolution to decriminalize plant-based entheogenic medicines. On a personal level, I've had several profound experiences with plant medicines that resulted in reduced anxiety and an increase in overall mental health well-being. Additionally, I've become much more involved with my community, and I'm an active member of the Olympia Psychedelic Integration Circle, which provides a welcoming space for individuals to share their experiences with plant medicines for both healing and personal growth. I believe these substances have great potential to address major societal issues like PTSD, depression, end-of-life anxiety, and substance use disorder, which clinical studies worldwide are proving. It's also crucial to educate the general public on the benefits and risks so that they are used in a safe and responsible manner. In conclusion, I feel it's extremely important to destigmatize these medicines so that they can be used without fear of legal prosecution as a powerful tool to address our society's mental health crisis. This resolution would be a major step for our community toward achieving that goal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Patrick Seifert.
Hello, y'all, and thank you for letting me speak here today. I brought my family and some veterans from 22 Too Many. We're right down the street from here. We've been helping veterans in this city since 2011, providing free medical cannabis to veterans who can't afford it, and veterans that don't want to mess around with pharmaceuticals from the VA anymore. And we've helped them make that transition. Obviously, we are in support of this measure to decriminalize, and there's so much I want to say that it's just impossible to say in 2 minutes, but I've been the founder of 22 Too Many since 2011, and a lot of other, excuse me. You guys can rise to the occasion. You guys can really make history here in Olympia and lead the way. There's so many other cities that are following, waiting to see what you guys do with this measure and to follow suit. And I ask that, I don't know where the vote is right now, but everybody come in support of this so we can make a statement from Olympia, letting everybody else know that this is important. You guys have the opportunity to do something for veterans in our community. You know, we had a guy in our organization, John Harding, and I need to bring him up as quickly as I can. Just down the road from here, he shot himself in the head dead from his PTSD, and this wasn't available back in 2008. And this is something I think that would have helped John, and he would still be here with us today if something like this was available for him. And there's so many others in his footsteps. He was the last person in our organization that we thought would commit suicide. And so it was a real shocker to us. And we just want to be there for all the veterans. And we would look to reinstate our 501c19 and doing a lot more in the community again. And we hope that you come to us and ask us for help, and we'll do the same with you. You guys can lead the way, please. We need this, please.
Thank you, Patrick. Next we have Jeff Lording, followed by William Ridgway, followed by Candace Mercer.
So I go by Big Red Loving, if you can't tell just by looking at me, it's pretty obvious. So the last few days and years have proven one thing to me, though I pray that I am wrong about this. Antifa only wants anarchy and chaos as the ultimate solution when things don't go their way. The other side is willing to let the democratic process take its course without violent repercussions. So, I come before you to ask a simple question about Antifa and their constituents. How do you plan on working with Trump supporters in this city? These are still people, and attacking them in Olympia for showing their support does not help your case. The only thing that can and will work is for us to show that we can work together to make this community better. We want to change the community by acknowledging the lack of treatment for the mentally ill and a complete disregard for the homeless community. This is the path myself and many others that just so happen to support Trump are willing to take to make Olympia better. Some of us go to work every day and see nothing has changed. Many volunteer their time already for those in need, but it's still not enough. The current legislation in all its glory has done nothing and will continue to do nothing. So, we the people must rise to the challenge to show them how things can be fixed. Will this council on this day, July 16th, 2024, denounce the ever-increasing malice and violence? Will they address the bias for certain individuals based solely on having a red hat and a different set of values? Will this council strive to create a community in the spirit of '76 and the way the Founding Fathers intended, with God and freedom at the forefront? Only time will tell. Will the Antifa presence in Olympia drop the charade of anarchy and chaos and work together with the community at large to address these problems? Will they be willing to break bread and work with others outside of their circle for a greater Olympia? Only time will tell. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. However, I do, as I said before we started public comment, please do not refer your support or opposition to a candidate or a ballot measure, and that includes the federal government as well. So, again, please refrain. Thank you.
Next we have William Ridgway. William, are you here?
I'm ready.
Oh, go ahead.
So in light of what you just said about not mentioning federal candidates, I will not give my prepared comments, and I will say that there is a diversity of viewpoints in Olympia that is represented in people that have been targeted for harassment and violence in this community. And these people represent a minority perspective when it comes to their viewpoint. And this has been a trend that has been going on for years, and we have seen things escalate to a very dangerous place. And it is wonderful that you have condemned the attempted assassination of Trump, but what I need to see, what I want to see, is action taken on how, I'm asking you, how are you going to bring people who are in that minority viewpoint position, who are part of the community, into the fold and help alleviate the tensions and the real sufferings that are caused by this breakdown of communication, this inability to talk across worldviews has put us in a position where we are at each other's necks, and the inability to communicate is a prerequisite for violence. And people like me want nothing more than civility. People like me have the option of civility or incivility. There are lots of people in the world, and we want the best for everyone. And we are humans, and we cannot be pressed against the wall and expected to behave at our best 100% of the time. So how are you going to facilitate bringing that minority viewpoint into the fold and bringing unity to Olympia?
Thank you, William. I'll just mention, I know, Candace, you're ready to give your comments. I heard with that last one, I did hear a direct question. So for folks that may not be aware, we'll take all of the public comment, and then at the end, there's an opportunity for council to make remarks if we wish to. So we're listening to you. That's just how we run the process. So, thank you. Go ahead, Candace.
Two core values define America: free speech and a progressive commitment to nonviolent protest. I come before the council tonight asking for an official statement denouncing the assassination attempt on President Trump and political violence in Olympia. The last time I made this request was in 2021 when I ran for council after an armed mob came to harm me while I shot my campaign video here at City Hall. An immigrant man of color was shot and disabled for life that day at the transit center. I asked council for protection and to make clear that political violence would not be tolerated in Olympia. I was met with eye rolls, poorly stifled laughter, and victim blaming, notably by our mayor pro tem. Your continued talk of erasing white supremacy is a dehumanizing dog whistle that creates a permissive environment for violence against people like me. These posters can be found throughout the city. I can't read them because they're obscene. I am not safe to wear this shirt.
Ms. Mercer, I'm going to ask you to please lower that. Thank you very much.
This council has a responsibility to de-escalate the situation before we have a repeat of 2020 and 2021 when blood was repeatedly shed on the streets of Olympia. This is a chance for you to walk your talk of unity and creating an Olympia that is safe and welcoming to all. I call on you to act with radical decency by making an official statement that violence will not be tolerated in Olympia. I ask Mayor Payne, a veteran who has served our country, to be a leader and make it happen. Thank you.
All right, next we have Richard Burgess? Sorry if I mispronounced it. Oh, you can go ahead. It'll start once you start.
Okay, all right, good to see you guys. My name is Richard Burgess. I'm at Fernridge Apartments on the west side. I've got air quality issues where I'm at, electrical off-gassing, and the water's no good. I can handle that the water's not that great. And I've failed the housing inspection twice, and I think it's rigged. I think they got it in for me for some reason. I failed it twice due to the sink apparatus. And the maintenance guys are supposed to come out. It's been like 2 months. This has been going on since April. So it scares me to bleepity bleep that I could lose my housing voucher. And like I said, there's air quality issues, electrical off-gassing, because there's 3 bullets in the walls from the shooting that happened like a month ago. And You know, I'm just, so I'm concerned about the voucher thing. And it's not the first time that this has happened with housing where they want to try to get me off the books. I believe it involves people higher up the food chain. They want me out of my apartment. Hopefully that can be taken care of. Richard Burgess, Chantilly Secondary School alumni. I write some creative stuff. And of course, there goes the butterflies. Psilocybin good to me, psilocybin very good to me. But that was a long time ago. So I'm with the plant-based remedies. Unfortunately, I can't do that because I'm on HUD housing. And they need to turn the corner on that. I'm talking about, you know, cannabis and so forth. I'm not allowed to do that, even though I'm predisposed to glaucoma. So that needs to be fixed. But hopefully everything can move progressively with Olympia, and have a fantastic day. 1-360-485-3632, saxonjade333@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. At this time, we'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment, and we have one signed up, which is Joanne Lee. So I'll go ahead and give a moment to get that up.
Joanne is traveling.
Thank you. Joanne, looks like you're still muted.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity to speak briefly in favor of the decriminalization of entheogens that's being considered by the council. I'm Joanne Lee, the natural coach. I've been in business in Olympia for 26 years. I help people transform themselves, their lives, their work, their relationships. And I'm also a spiritual teacher in the Trillium Awakening Tantric tradition. You may know entheogen is from the Greek meaning becoming divine within. Entheogens, commonly referred to as psychedelics, have been in use by cultures all around the world for thousands of years. They've been recognized for their proven power to heal, to connect us with our most authentic selves, to recognize both our divinity and our humanity, and to awaken us to our spirituality. I believe we need every tool available to us at this critical time for our country, for our culture, for the human race. Recent research has shown the efficacy of these medicines in relieving anxiety, depression, PTSD, the fear of death, as well as increasing fundamental wellness and opening people to unity consciousness, the reality that we are all one. We are all in this together. Our police and emergency responders deserve our support and funds to focus on dangerous drugs like the opioids and fentanyl, and to attend to violence against people and property. So let's free up their attention and funding and take this victimless crime off their plates. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you. That concludes in-person and virtual public comments, so we can take it back to the mayor.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the dais? Councilmember Madron.
Yeah, I mentioned this last week after we had some public comment on the decriminalization of entheogens, but we are looking at mid-August to bring that resolution forward, just so that you all are aware of the timeline for that. But thanks for being here.
Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. I don't, am I on? No.
No, it just went off by itself. Hey, there we are. All right. First, I appreciate the return and the new voices speaking in terms of the decriminalizing entheogens. I think that's a really important option to have for people. And I'm especially moved and influenced myself by the potential benefit for veterans who are experiencing too much trauma they didn't sign up for. I also want to comment, I really appreciate Big Red, William, and Candace speaking about civility and how we don't repeat 2020. We've done work internally as a city organization to figure out different ways to respond, but it's also going to be on the broader community, right? That we've got to hold it together, and the calls for civility are going to be super important this fall. And I'll just be standing out there on the sidewalk also, saying that everybody has a place on the street in our city, but that nobody has the right to shove somebody else off the sidewalk with a weapon. That's just not okay. So we'll continue to prepare and plan, and we've changed our processes quite a bit over these last few years. So I just wanted to recognize that it is important to plan and to be aware that tempers will flare. So thank you for coming out tonight.
Councilmember Vanderpool, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Well, first thing I want to mention on decriminalization, I would like to thank the folks from 22 Too Many for coming out. I mean, all I wrote down was bravery for talking about your experiences. I mean, and to talk about someone from your community that had committed suicide in the past. It is really difficult to talk about these things, and it's really difficult to come out and speak on these things, and I do appreciate you coming. I really do. The second thing I would like to talk about is about unity and civility. I've had the opportunity in my life to live in both a very urban area and a very rural area, in urban Baltimore, and then in a very rural and suburban Ohio. And in these different places, I think the strength of these communities comes from their love for their local government and their local community, really. To consider what we can do on the local level, I mean, tensions are high on the national level, and they often are, but a lot of what brings people together is their love for their local government, their local community. I mean, really, what we can do together on the local level, it is clearly important. And so what I believe is that, our angels of our better nature do come out in these places. And so I do appreciate coming out. We may not disagree on a lot of things, but our value is in our local government and our care for our neighbors and our community. So I thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Again, gratitude for everyone that showed up in person or virtually today to share your thoughts with us and your concerns. We have heard a couple of times now from folks that are pro, I believe it's called, to decriminalize nature. And so I know that I have quite a bit of homework on this one and folks to reach out to. I appreciated hearing from folks from before, and then also some new folks, particularly 22 Too Many. I've been a community member for a good amount of time, and I've passed by 22 Too Many and have really wondered what it is. And I don't know if you can just walk in there whenever, or if you have an appointment, but I would love to talk more and meet folks at 22 Too Many. And understand this more. I think that you said you had too many things to talk about in too little time, and I have so many questions. And then also on political violence, I won't go too long on this one. I agree with much of what was said by my colleagues already. Civility is something that I think a lot of us have been kind of chewing on for a while now, even before the horrific happenings of the weekend. and on different topics too, not just politics. I think that I see of course, it's a really charged time right now, but there's just this. One of our public commenters has said it, that this is inability to communicate with each other, right? We're having differing viewpoints, and we're seeing it in a lot of places, and it's something that is very stressful and that I think about all the time, and I know that that is true of the community and the peers around me. Yeah, absolutely. I try not to throw out ideas on the dais and make them sound like promises, and we might not have the resources to follow up. But I just think about what are ways that we can be proactive, other than making sure that every time you walk in here, everybody that works here, that comes to public comment, comes to present, has a safe space to do so, right, and to voice their perspectives. Though I wonder what is an appropriate way for the city government to help foster more understanding in the community? Now, I don't mean complete harmony. I believe that there is absolutely diversity in this community, diversity of thought too, I mean. And so, sometimes the goal is not necessarily to agree, but it's definitely to coexist. And I think a lot about respect, and it's about respecting each other. Candace, I know this is not the forum for a back and forth. You had mentioned me, so I have kind of a lot of thoughts about what you'd said, but I think that for tonight and in this venue, all I can say is that it sounds like you felt disrespected by me at some point that you had referenced, and for that, I apologize. Thanks. Thank you. And then with that, I don't think Richard is still here, although we did capture the email is on recording, and so for what it's worth, if you are still here, Richard, I don't see you, but we could have staff reach out to you. Wondering if there's some miscommunication. It sounds like there's a larger story here, so that's everything. Thanks.
Thank you. So to all of the folks that are here to speak to decriminalization, I spoke a little bit about this last week as well. So obviously you're probably familiar with what I said, which is that I don't need to be sold on the medicinal, spiritual aspects of decriminalizing this. My main concern is around making sure that that our community clearly understands what it is that we're proposing and what we're talking about, particularly as we realize that substance abuse is a problem, not just in our community, but nationwide. And so we want to be very clear about what it is that we're doing and that there is proper messaging and things of that nature so that our community clearly understands what's happening. So that's where I'm at. As a veteran, I have to tell you that that's the other reason I don't need to be sold. I certainly understand the plight that several of former service members have suffered with PTSD and other mental illnesses that impacts their lives. And this is one way that several studies, several organizations have found that there has been some success. And just because the government hasn't necessarily caught up to the science doesn't mean that it's something that we should just outright reject. And so I remain open, and I appreciate you coming here tonight in support. In terms of a response to increasing political violence in our country and in the community, I spoke to that just a bit at the top of the meeting. Obviously, it's something we strongly condemn. But I will say this. Every single time the Olympia City Council makes a decision to do something for our community, we are not thinking about who's supporting who, right? We're simply doing what is in what we believe is the best interest of the people who live in this community. And so I will say that we certainly understand that there might be a concern, but this council has no agenda other than to do what's in the best interest for our community members. I understand that since 2016, really, that was sort of a turning point in our country where I'm not sure that many people were paying attention to what city councils were doing around the nation before that time. Maybe here in Olympia, because we have a very involved and engaged constituency, but other places, not so much. And suddenly what we saw is our former mayor, Selby, dealing with a lot of things that were so unprecedented for a local official to have to deal with. And so this is certainly something that we hear you on, that we share that concern. We have been in conversations with our police chief and our leaders, city staff, on what our plans are. We certainly have learned a lot from 2020 and 2021, and we have made some adjustments to our crowd management policies and things of that nature. And so we're certainly taking this into consideration. And I will just say that I don't feel that that we can promise or guarantee safety in this regard. We can encourage it. We have elected officials every day in this country on the other side that are condemning this violence, and yet it happens. And so what I will say is we will continue to use our platforms to speak out against it, but beyond that, we will do what we can to bring action to our community to prevent whatever we can from happening. But we can't guarantee what lone actors might do, and that's just the reality of the world that we live in. And in a lot of ways, I think that's because, frankly, I personally feel as though politics is just taking on a new energy in this country. In some ways, I even think it's like it's replaced religion or something. And so I think that has brought a lot of this out in people, and they don't necessarily have an outlet of where to express it, and local government has become one of those places. And so we're with you, we hear you, we will do what we can to support you, to provide safety to our community, and please know that we're on the same side. So. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Just quickly, for folks, I'm always encouraged when we hear from people that don't usually show up, and also I enjoy seeing the people that are frequent. Though, we had a couple of public commenters, I think at least there's a couple, that said, I feel like, or we are, or that they were a minority in some way, right? And to me, we do a lot of belonging work at the city. We've started doing a lot of belonging work. And so when someone says that they feel like this other outside entity, it concerns me. I don't know, I just kind of key in on that. And so I guess what I'll say is this: coming here and public commenting, perspectives, opinions aside, I do really appreciate it. We as a council really appreciate it when people come in and share. And I hope that people leave with, even if it's not an immediate resolve, that they felt truly welcomed when they came here to public comment, and will share that experience with other people, so that those minorities sort of start to kind of feel a little less marginalized and feel a little less alone, and can continue coming in here, and we bring more people and we hear more voices as well. I'm not sure what that planning to help foster civility, to make sure things are safe, what that's going to look like. But if there is an opportunity to participate, for community members to participate, I hope that you will. We have had work groups form on a number of topics over the last few years, emerging topics. I think about just recently, I was talking to someone about reimagining public safety and what that looks like, and boy, talk about a diversity of opinions on that one, and a tough topic. And so I guess I bring that up because our work groups, one of the things that is so important to making it actually have a successful product is for people that honestly disagree with each other to come together and continue coming together until we have that product. So for what it's worth, if you see something in the future on social media or however you get your City of Olympia news and there's an opportunity to participate, I hope you'll think about it, and I hope you'll think about sharing it with others. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we will move on to adoption of the consent calendar. And I have a request to remove 4G and pull that for a separate action. So at this time, I need a motion to adopt the consent calendar minus 4G.
Motion to adopt the consent calendar minus 4G.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to adopt the consent calendar minus 4G signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Consent calendar is adopted. All right, so requests to pull for separate action is 4G, which is approval of an ordinance adopting the Capitol Mall Triangle Sub-Area Plan, which is on second reading. So at this time, I need a motion to approve the plan.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 6-1.
No.
6-1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. I'm always having my colleagues in mind, even when they're not here. All right. So that takes us to our first item of business this evening, which is item 6A, which is an update on the Hands-On Children's Museum expansion. And here to present this evening is Patty Belmonte, the Executive Director of the Hands-On Children's Museum. Hi, Patty.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much. I'm going to grab my water bottle just in case. Okay. I really appreciate this opportunity to give you an update on the expansion planning for the museum. Kelly, can I advance or are you advancing? Okay. 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 So before I share the specifics of expansion planning, I just wanted to bring you up to date on where we are right now as an organization. And you may find this hard to believe because I find it hard to believe, but later this year we will start our 13th year in what we still call our new home on East Bay. And during all of those years, Hands On has been the most visited children's museum in the Pacific Northwest. We have more visitors per square foot of exhibit space than any of the nation's 470 children's museums. We are also a nationwide leader in access. Of the 315,000 people that we will host this year, about 140,000 come in on some form of free or reduced access. And thanks to our awesome staff, our engaging exhibits, and our wonderful programs, we are consistently a Best of Award winner nationally as well as regionally. We also like to think that we're enriching the quality of life in Olympia. And a couple years ago, we restarted the pet parade, which just happened in June. The Olympian gave that to us after 99 years or something. And so you can see there were a lot of cute kids and animals, and we think we can do a lot to bring that event back as a real beloved regular. This last weekend, we did our very popular Fire Rescue Spectacular event with Olympia's fire department, police department, and planning and development was there this year. And so the street was filled with about 2,500 people, and all those adorable kids who want to be junior firefighters couldn't wait to either hug Sparky the fire dog or love on a firefighter. I thought you'd be interested in seeing the history of our growth. This is attendance over 30 years. And in 1996, we started at the old school pizzeria site. And what I've done for you is put green on the expansion years, and then also what we estimate in 2027, which would be the first possible year we could be open in an expansion. So you can see that in its earliest days, we started with 15,000 visitors a year, and as I said, we expect to serve 315,000 visitors this year. Along with that growth over time, we've also had a significant growth in our free and reduced programs. We have always been committed to having the Hands-On Children's Museum be a museum for all, and we have always looked for ways to support that. This vision really took a jump in 2017 when Washington State Employees Credit Union decided to underwrite a new program for us. It has become our largest program, and that's our EBT program. So any family can show their EBT card at the desk and receive either $3 or free admission. You can see that when we started the program, we were serving over 12,000 people a year, and last year it was 38,422 children and families that took advantage of the museum. That is one of 30 different access programs at the museum. We are a mid-sized museum with a king-size attendance. We have visitors from every state and multiple countries every year. So it's not surprising that back in 2017, we were thinking about how can we use this space to the fullest. We've always been open 7 days a week, so it wasn't an option to open another day. We did extend our hours. We added multi-day events. So, for example, Boo Bash now, instead of a weekend, it's a 10-day event. We began selling time tickets during the pandemic because that allowed us to better space visitors out through the museum. And then we also began promoting folks to have not only after-hours party, private events, but after-hours birthday parties and field trips even at night. We also do our first Friday night program that we do every month, and that's in the evening on Friday nights, on the first Friday of the month. This slide shows you that Hands-On has less square footage than any of the nation's children's museums that are serving about the same attendance. So what I've done for you here is in blue is visitation with Olympia being first, and the orange represents the square footage of museums that are in large metro areas like Kids Space in Pasadena, as well as smaller areas like Chattanooga. Of note, we have 2 children's museums. Well, let's see, did I do one on here? Yep, Everett is Imagine Children's Museum. They just expanded their space and have over 60,000 square feet, but are serving fewer people than we are. We're also a regional leader for attracting high visitation among other museum types. The previous slide was all children's museums. So these are some of the museums that you would find in our area that you would recognize, like the Museum of Glass and the Tacoma Art Museum. Yes, and the Tacoma Art Museum. And you can see Hands-On there in red. And then I did go ahead and put in the Museum of Flight and what they're serving right now, because our projection is that we would be in the high 400s when we expanded in 2027, when we opened in 2027. I just wanted to give you a look at that. So we've been using this for some time because obviously if we're thinking about expansion, we need to think about the future. We've watched this steady growth. We know the comp plan is being updated, but we are seeing that trajectory continue to go. And because we pull so many people from outside of Thurston County, there's also the issue of how are the other areas in our state growing, because we pull Oregon and Washington and Canada really strong, and so we've been watching those areas as well. I'm a board member with Experience Olympia and Beyond, and we've been working on our destination master plan, so we've been compiling a lot of research, and I thought that it was interesting when we received this research on the key drivers of visitors and why they're attracted to our area. And as you can see in 5 and 6, family fun, attractions, and museums were key drivers for the, I believe we had about 1,000 in that survey group. So knowing all of this, knowing that we've had really crowded days, and knowing that we need to do something for the future here, we began during COVID we put our expansion plans on hold, but we began doing research. And just recently, we decided that with all the work that we did, we needed to pay for a feasibility study to really determine the cost of that expansion and what it would look like. And what we decided is that we really needed a campus approach. When the museum started, we opened the building. It was a beautiful new building, filled with about 75% of the exhibits, and the outside was a pile of dirt. And over many years, excuse me, we have formed that pile of dirt into wonderful outdoor exhibits. So what did we want to do with this campus approach? You can see in the yellow box that we needed more parking. Just so you know, right now, for the last several years, we've been leasing parking across the street behind the museum from the port. And on very special days like Fire Rescue Spectacular, we're also leasing across the street by the Walker John property. And so parking is a huge issue for us. We do already lease staff parking. We have about 71 staff. And we lease parking from the church across the street on, what that'd be there, Plum or East Bay, and for our staff. We also now have become a regional hub for school field trips, and we not only host field trips from our own area, but we have field trips from Pierce County, King County, Quilcene, faraway places. And so with that, we knew that we needed a better bus drop-off and pickup situation. We also, as you know, Olympia's lost some event space. Part of the way we fund the operations of the museum is to host after-hours private events, and that could be anything from a legislative function to a holiday party to a summer wedding. We have a lot of requests for those, and we don't have a single space big enough unless we use the outdoor space. And so in our thinking, what we were also missing is a traveling exhibit gallery. And the beauty of a traveling exhibit gallery is that it is very flexible, and you can bring in exhibits from other places to really stimulate out-of-town visitation as well as local visitation. So we created a flex event space and traveling exhibit gallery together that would host 250 to 300 people and have access to the outdoors so you could have an indoor-outdoor event. We have been working for quite some time on our culinary program at the museum. We wanted to create a culinary school for kids, and we have won a national Museums for America grant 4 years 4 times in a row for our Young Makers program, and one of those Young Makers was our Inspired Chefs program. So in the new museum, we have already planned in a culinary classroom as well as adjacency to a new cafe, an expanded cafe space. We have, our preschool program is highly attended, and we often have people on the wait list. So we added additional classroom space, and I'm sure you won't be surprised to know that we've had a number of requests for some sort of a daycare program. So as we've planned for space, we planned for more classrooms, which would give us the flexibility of possibly doing that if we decided there was still a community need and we could manage it. We also knew that we needed a new entry plaza for all the different folks that are coming in. Our entry plaza is somewhat small, and many people are coming from behind, and there were safety issues about crossing an alley, that sort of thing. So those are all the things we kept in mind. And just to show you in terms of really simple square footage, the existing museum is about 28,000 square feet, and the new museum addition is between 30 and 35,000 square feet with a sky bridge that goes across. And right now it's planned for the second floor. And as I sit here talking about all of this, I realize I didn't say we have a whole group of our Hands on Children's Museum board members. Raise your hand. Thank you for being here. In terms of outdoor space, we have about 28,000, does that say 25,000 square feet of outdoor space. We would gain another 16,000 in outdoor space and about 10,000 in a new arrival plaza. This would give you an idea for our vision. We want the addition to look like it belongs to the original building. And so we see us marrying that up. And you can see in the buff colored circle, you can see that would be additional new outdoor space. We would abandon the alley between us, which is a personal alley, and really close those up so that they go together. This is a look at the aesthetic where we think we have the most beautiful building ever, and we want to maintain that in an expansion. And so we would keep the same aesthetic of the natural wood, and we have many doors that open to the outdoors, and this is in that event, traveling exhibit and event space. And if you see to the left, we have several glass doors that could open up to expand that space on to the new outdoor space. So how would we get there? This project that we were just wrapping up confirmed that we could do this for $35 million, which was our original estimate. And we have a number of funding sources. So you will see in the large green here that we have estimated about $23 million from the Public Facilities District funds. And I think you all know that we're very fortunate because there are 2 PFD projects in our region. That's the Rack and Lacey and the Children's Museum in Olympia. And the PFD funds have been extended by the legislature for existing projects. And so that is, there needs to be some further calculation, but approximately $23 million is the potential from the new PFD funds that will be coming in. We also have met with our state and federal representatives, and we have placed amounts in here that are consistent with what they are telling us we could likely get for this project. We did apply for and win a Building for the Arts grant for a future expansion. We will need to ask for reappropriation of that because we're crossing a budget year and we're not ready to go. But we feel that that will likely be a possibility that would be reauthorized, and that's $1.6 million. In terms of the foundations that we work with, we are having pre-meetings with those foundations right now. We feel very confident in the number that we have there. We also have been having quiet conversations with our major business and individual donors, and again, we feel confident with the amount that we show of $3 million. We have estimated small community gifts as a collective of $500,000. So again, this is to give you an idea that we are doing our homework and we have a good sense of how this building could be funded. We also know that once you expand, it's costly and you have to run the place. And so what this slide shows you is the growth in our budget over the 30 years. The earlier slide showed you our growth in attendance. This shows you our budget growth. This year our budget is about $5.2 million, and what I've also put on this slide is how the percentage that our budget increased after each expansion in green. And so as you get bigger, you estimate less of a percentage growth. And so for the 2027 year, you can see that we're estimating about 60% growth. We've put together a preliminary timeline, and this is for the 4 years starting in this year. We've just completed the feasibility study confirming the $35 million. And there are a couple key things that need to happen this year. One is that we have the 2 parcels behind us that we've already have a positive response from the port to secure for the Children's Museum. We've had a first right of refusal from the port for the last couple of years. And we need to negotiate that, the sale of that land. We also need to approve financing for the expansion. Because of the Public Facilities District funds, the building stays in the public's ownership. And so because of that, the Children's Museum cannot finance the building or the land on our own because it must reside in public ownership. And then also the city would prepare, we have asked the city if they will consider a progressive design build approach, and that's because we think it could be the most efficient way to use the funding. And we feel excited about that possibility because we can design and tweak on the fly if things become too expensive. And so there is some pre-work that would need to be done with that because the initial stage is a public process. And with this estimate in terms of what we need to do and what the city would do, we're estimating again that the earliest we could open would be summer, fall of 2027. So I know I gave you a lot of information there, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Patty. That was like being back in a board meeting.
Former board member.
Yeah, it's so good to see you all and to see the support behind you. So thanks for being here tonight. Any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I really appreciate your presentation, Patty. I'm always very impressed by you and your heart for the organization. And boy, do you get things done. I mean, you presented to us. You made the compelling case. I also was looking at the pie that you had there, and it's funny, even the small contributions is not small. And you can see how much community business support. I've had the opportunity to be at some of your splash events in the summer, and it is incredible how much the community wants this. And then just seeing your membership alone. So I just want to make sure that I'm not getting lost as to what the upcoming ask is. So could you just clarify how can the city help?
And Jay may have.
Thank you. For the record, Jay Burney, City Manager. So Aaron B. Miller, our Finance Director, and I have been working with Patty and her board for some time on kind of options. One of the things that Patty mentioned, it was one of the struggles, I was actually the project executive lead on the first go-around of the museum. And one of the struggles that the museum had is because the city owned all the assets, when we built the shell and then the museum had to go and raise their funds and get money to do all the internal work. We owned everything, assets included, because we needed collateral for our own loans in case something happened. So the museum had a difficult time getting loaned money. It's safe to say in this current scenario, the same situation will occur. So what's the most feasible for the museum is that the city would carry the debt. Aaron and I have done the legal work on that. That is something the city can do. We're early in that conversation. I'm not here to ask you tonight whether or not you say yes or no to that. I think you need to see the numbers. We need to come back to you with Patty's numbers laid out with all those pieces and let you know what that looks like. We'll do that at a future meeting, but I want to let you know that is the ask that will come your way. So really tonight, if you have a concern with us continuing down that path, I'd love to hear that. If you're okay with us considering continuing to look at that and then bring something back to you can respond to, that would be my ask of you right now.
Do you mind? Okay. Thank you. I do not have a concern with you continuing down that path, knowing that it's, we're not deciding it tonight. And then I know that colleagues are, I'm sure, anxious to give comments and questions, but thanks for the magic that you bring to all of the children that come through to the place and for the board as well.
Thank you very much. Lots of people make it happen.
Councilmember Gilman.
This is an exciting vision, and I have to say that on Saturday, my niece Haley's out visiting, and with the art supplies at the hands-on, she created the ultimate snow cone holder, and then we spent the evening sort of dissecting the design and figuring out ways to improve it. So I'm so grateful for that learning lab and all of the exhibits. Could we do, and so I've met with members of the board, we've talked about this in other maintenance needs over the years, and I still don't quite understand would we bond the upfront amount and then the public facilities district would pay back parts of that over many years, or how does that 23 million fit in with the amount that we would finance?
Yeah, so in this scenario, again, which we'll bring to you later, the idea is that we would bond for the entire $35 million of the project. PFD, right now, our early estimate's around $23 million. The expansion goes out to, the extension of PFD goes out to 2043. So we think there'll be about $23 million in PFD revenue that will come in over that time. And then that $23 million will pay a portion of the debt service. Patty, through her fundraising, will be responsible for paying the other portion of the debt service, over probably the 20 years of bond obligation that we'll go for. So that's how that will work. So at the end of the day, we have to do the math and do the numbers for two reasons. One, to make sure we can verify what we firmly believe will be the PFD contribution. And two, for Patty to see the true cost of the museum, to be able to say, yes, we feel confident we can fundraise that. Obviously, the risk to the city in this scenario is that if the museum isn't able to come up with their contribution, we're on the hook for it either way. But I think the track record that we have with Patty and the museum and their fundraising is why I'm here tonight saying I'd love to keep having this conversation to see where it goes, and I'm not a hard no at this point in time for the financials.
That's great. So my one reservation would be that we don't put the next 20 years of responsibility on Patty's shoulders, because there might be other things that she wants to do in the next 20 years. As grateful as I am for all of the years of your directing the hands-on, I think with the board and 70 other staff people, that there's probably a pretty deep bench to carry this forward, and that's another reassurance I think we'll be looking for, is that you're not actually on the hook as an individual, and we don't have to have your spark and charisma at every event to see this through. So.
One more thing I wanted to add, Councilmember Gilman, because I thought you were going to ask me in your question, but I'm ready for it, because you asked me earlier about where our councilmanic debt capacity is. So as council knows, the first 1.5% of our total property value is what the councilmanic debt that the council can authorize without a vote of the people. So that limit for you is $166 million. And of that, you have outstanding non-voted debt of about $48 million. So you have, at this moment in time, about almost $118 million of councilmanic debt capacity. So
This 35 fits pretty easily within that and still leaves you room for other opportunities that may come to you in the future. So I just want to make sure I got that to you as well.
And can I just add to that, that the way we're doing the Children's Museum now, which was so problematic, is we split the project in two, and that's when we had to go out and find our own financing. So we literally had to use exhibits and chairs and tables and computers as the asset for our portion, where the city was able to use the PFD for its portion. But we can't do that now because it's too large. And it's a whole different ballgame than it was when we did this before. But really, more importantly, this was how the PFD was intended. It was intended for governments to have this flow of money for either a tourism facility, like a Maidenbauer Center, a sports field, or an attraction like the Children's Museum. And it was intended for the public entity to bond. And so, again, Jay and I are really thorough people, and we will work on that with the support of our board before we bring you anything to respond to.
Councilmember Vanderpool.
I do appreciate my councilmates' comments about about the budget and where we're going forward, and part of my question was about that, but it's been answered. I am looking forward to a very detailed report next time, and a very detailed, some of it, just as much detail as you can, because I'm sure some of the public will have very detailed questions, and the more we have information, the better we will be going forward. Particularly, I think of, we're building a new building. How energy efficient is this building? How is it affected by sea rise? Other various questions that we may be outside of the scope of the museum, but the public will have questions about. So
Just so you know, last time we did a lot of work on sea level rise. We built that building a foot above projected sea level rise. The building is covered with solar panels. It was designed to be an uber efficient building. We are a model, we are a gold, LEED Gold, and we have a heat, Lot was able to repurpose their waste methane to heat and cool the Children's Museum. So we're gonna take all of the care and concern that we put into our first building and carry it over to the next building.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, it's good to see you. It's good to see all of you again. I didn't expect you to come here and not be thorough. You always are. So obviously I am, thumbs up all the way to continue. I do just wonder a little bit about if you could break down for those who might be listening or paying attention around, you had on your slide about the city negotiating the purchase of the port land. Maybe some explanation as to that. And I do recall there being a conversation about air rights as well. So I'm just curious about, I think you had that on your timeline slide, but how that would all work as we're expecting the PFD funds to come in, and if you could just paint that picture for us a little bit.
I think Jay is negotiating right now with legal back and forth with the port. But what happened last time is the city purchased the land, and it was the city's preference to do that because, again, you can use that against your PFD when you bond. You can use that, and it was, again, preferable. And so when we looked into this, it's perfectly legal to have a PFD project where part of the building is sitting on purchased land and part of the building is sitting on leased land. But it's a much better situation in the long term for both parcels to be purchased, and it's cleaner. And so that's why in our early talks with the city, it was preferable to ask the port if we could purchase for this project.
That's the part I wanted you to say. Okay, thank you. Jay, you have something?
Yeah, I'll just add, just to tag on to what Patty said. So we did have a meeting with the port executive director about this. She did take it to the commission. They have given the okay to start negotiations with the city. So our legal team is in the process of talking to their legal team, and we'll start to negotiate that. That's a separate action that will need to come before the council. It's intended that will all be lumped into the total project cost, and that's how we'll pay for this. So we've got some more work on the numbers to do, but we'll bring all that forward to you at a different time. But I want you to know that's coming your way as well.
Okay, and just to clarify, this will be sort of like a slate of different actions. So I believe there's a $2 million PFD match, so that will be a separate action than that, correct?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a few things here. Yeah, there's a question mark on that. I think it's an ask by Patty. So the last time we did the first go-around, the city did contribute some match to the project in of a modest nature. I think Patty's asking for that. Again, I told her to put the question mark on it because it is a question to the council. It'll be something as we come back to you later. We'll have to figure out how we do that and what that looks like. And again, on top of that, you've got the real estate purchase, an ask from Patty, and then ultimately an ask from the museum to carry the financing.
We did calculate the land into that 35 million.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, sounds like we're excited for you to keep going. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you and to thank the board because the Hands-On Children's Museum is certainly a staple in Olympia. It is something that I hear about all the time. People who don't live in Olympia, one of the first things out of their mouths is usually the Hands-On Children's Museum. I've been to the museum, it's so cool. And then, of course, I'm bragging about how I used to be on the board. You know, I do think that for what it's worth, this is something that clearly doesn't just benefit the Hands-On Children's Museum as an organization, but it benefits the city of Olympia. And you have shown that repeatedly over and over, which is why I think you see sort of a unanimous go ahead and see what we can do with this, because we can see the future benefit of how it will benefit the museum and our community at large, and how the children, more importantly, in our community are going to benefit from just an incredible entity like the Hands-On Children's Museum. So thank you for your leadership. Miss you all on the board. And I'll see you again when you're back with another update.
And I just wanted to add my thanks to the board, because it takes so many leaders to make all of this happen. And you can see how many of them are here tonight. And this is a public-private partnership project, and those can be sticky, right? Because we're doing it together, and so our private donors that are putting money in, these folks, know that the asset still resides at the city. Just like you have to care that we have to make good on what we say we will do. And so we both take risk, we both share in that, and it's been really a remarkable relationship, and we've been super lucky to have Jay from the earliest days. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. So that takes us to our next item, which is item 6B, which is approval of a resolution authorizing an agreement with the Olympia Downtown Alliance on downtown vibrancy funding. And I'll turn it over to our city manager, Jay Burney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm back. For the record, Jay Burney, city manager. Several months ago, you received a funding request from the Olympia Downtown Alliance for you to consider as part of the Proposition 1 public safety funding. Just as a reminder, we expect to receive around $2.4 million annually from Prop 1. The request was for $285,000 from the ODA to aid in the continued funding of the Downtown Guides expansion, a maintenance worker, graffiti abatement, and tree lighting. At the time, I communicated to ODA Executive Director Todd Cutts that based on the staffing study undertaken by the police department, they would utilize the entirety of the $2.4 million in Prop 1 funds starting in 2025. However, there is an opportunity to provide some funding on a one-time basis from 2024 Prop 1 funding. We will receive a partial year of funding this year, which Finance Director Aaron B. Miller believes will be around $1.5 million. OPD will need about $1.2 million in funding in 2024 to begin moving forward with recommendations from a staffing study and acquiring some new vehicles, which leaves $300,000 available again one time. I expressed that to Todd and worked with Todd on a proposal to utilize this one-time funding to continue the programs in Todd's proposal through 2025. Todd has also found some matching funds as well, which he'll talk about, and he's here tonight to share his proposal with you and is looking for council approval. This request did go through the Finance Committee where it was approved unanimously. I do want to also point out before Todd comes up here that I also know that some council members want to have a longer-term discussion about the guide program versus our former ambassador program. This extension provides us more time to have that discussion early next year, and my commitment to you is we will have that discussion next year before the end of 2025, before this funding runs out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
Thanks, Jay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. First of all, I just want to say I don't like following Patty in these forums. We're looking at the Downtown Vibrancy Funding Package proposal. I think this is Downtown Vibrancy Funding Package Proposal Part 2 for the night. I think what you just heard was number 1. The commitment of Patty and the board really to vibrancy downtown. I mean, Patty and I have worked hand in hand. I've been here 7 years now, hand in hand over the years to making downtown a more vibrant place. And the Children's Museum is just such a huge part of that. So I was so excited to hear about the plans tonight. I was aware of them, but to hear them detailed, what they'll bring to downtown. One of the things I'll look forward to in the future is the thoroughfare between the museum and kind of the core of downtown and how we move our pedestrians, our people, guests to the museum and vice versa between the two spaces. I want to talk about this package this evening so we can advance. It was at me, right next to me. Thank you. Okay, so appreciate working with City Manager Bernie on this proposal. As you all are aware, we've been running our Downtown Guide program since 2018 with the support of the city since November of last year. We expanded the program from 2 guides to 4 guides. Really, with a small a, it is an ambassador-style program, and ambassador-style programs in downtowns have been around for probably 30 years. Funded by property assessment districts, usually, and managed by downtown associations, usually. We were lucky enough, I stepped into an environment where the city was funding an ambassador program and managing an ambassador program. The guide program back in 2018 was really meant to supplement what the city was doing with the ambassador program at that time. Back when the city transitioned last summer into the fall, we were happy to partner with the city and expand our guide service at that time. So that agreement right now with the city takes us through August of this year, so August 31st of this year with the expansion. Without an expansion of that expansion, we would go back to 2 guides, October 1st of this year. So what we're talking about, September 1st. So what we're talking about is continuing that expansion of the guide program through December 31st of 2025. Jay mentioned a matching program, and that really is private property owners downtown, and there's some nonprofits that are involved in that as well as government organizations. So the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction is a partner in this program with us. The Washington Center is a partner in this program with us, as well as downtown property owners and business owners, small business owners downtown. So this truly is a match, and Patty talked about a public-private partnership. This, at the moment, and hopefully moving forward, is also a public-private partnership. So what our ambassadors do, first and foremost, they're trying to support a welcoming environment for our guests downtown, our residents, our employees, business owners, property owners, our city employees overall. As I mentioned, we have 4 guides. This would retain funding for those 4 guides. We have a maintenance worker that is within this funding proposal as well. So this maintenance worker would really support that clean and welcoming environment downtown. We have the clean team, would supplement the clean team. Right now we have a maintenance worker on staff that was funded for 2024 by the PBIA. That is watering the flower baskets downtown. And when they can during that period, also cleaning up around, but that's taken up a lot of time, especially with the heat we've been having. So this would be supplemental to that. We'll be having a conversation with the PBI as well about funding the program in 2025. So essentially we would have 2 maintenance workers, we're hoping. Graffiti abatement. So we partnered with the city in 2024 on a graffiti abatement program. We're working with the clean team to abate graffiti that they can reach. We have a subcontractor that's doing anything that we have to reach by a ladder, second floor, third floor, that sort of thing. We also have our Lovely Painters program that's run by Anna Schlecht, who you all know, so our super volunteer coordinator. So we've really partnered on that. And one of the roles that we've taken is through our guide program, we've got a collector app. And our guides, anytime they see a tag downtown, they're recording that on the collector app. It geolocates it, it timestamps it, and then every day our admin pushes out that information to the clean team, our contractor, the Lovely Painters, and we're out there trying to get after it. So as you can see here, since the inception of the program in March, we've reported 186 tags downtown, 46 in July alone, so pretty prolific recently, and 69 of those have been abated. So we are working with property owners. We do need a authorization from property owners. We ask that they provide us with paint as well. So we haven't gotten all 186 yet. We're working on that. Sometimes that's that property owner we're working with. Tree lights is the last ask here. So at $60,000, this program was initiated in 2020. Your Economic Development Director, Mike Reed, really had the idea to light up downtown. We're going to talk in a moment about kind of cleanliness, safety downtown, the trends that we're seeing down here. But certainly when we hear people talking about safety downtown, part of what we hear when we're listening closely is, especially during those dark months, it's not well lit down here. Well, it's become more well lit down here in part because of your efforts, your investments, and we appreciate that. So we've been doing that in project managing that for you since the winter of 2020. This project is currently unfunded for October of 2024 and October of 2025. So this $60,000 would be for those two lighting cycles. So Jay asked me to talk a little bit about some survey work that we did recently. So we do an annual downtown vibrancy survey. We survey our stakeholders downtown, so it's not the community at large. You do that survey, but we try to get a sense of how are our stakeholders feeling, whether it's small business owners, whether it's property owners, our nonprofits, community organizations downtown. And one of the questions that we duplicated from your community survey was, how would you say things are going downtown? So blue is the right direction. Orange is the wrong track. So you could see back in 2021 when we asked this question, less than half of our stakeholders said downtown's going in the right direction. Bad news for the executive director of the Downtown Association. Since then, we've been trending upward. So 66% in 22, 67% in 23, and up to 82% in 2024. So moving in the right direction. We want to see that up in the 90th percentile, but feeling good about the trajectory, where we're going with that. We also asked questions about safety. So how safe do you feel downtown? And this slide compares 23 versus 24. So in 2023, if you aggregate very safe, somewhat safe, we see 70% of our stakeholders saying they feel safe downtown. When we look at that in 2024, we see 76%. So we're moving in the right direction there as well. That trend is going in the right direction for us. We parsed that out for daytime and nighttime. As you might imagine, the daytime numbers were higher. So you see to the left your community surveys, both in 2017 and 2020, 2021. We dipped down from 78 to 59% in those surveys. The rest of those are our downtown stakeholder surveys. Headed in the right direction there. 94% of our stakeholders responded this year, and we had 114 respondents overall. I didn't mention that. 94% said they're feeling safe downtown during the day. Still got work to do on our safety number during the night, and that's what we're talking about from a lighting perspective as well, hopefully helping with that feeling of safety downtown. So over half, which is a lot better than we were 4 years ago at 27%. We asked general questions about downtown cleanliness. This was the one number that was disappointing in the survey this year that took a dip. And we do this survey not just because we want to understand numbers and we like surveying our stakeholders, but we respond to this organizationally. We plan our strategic plan and budget our dollars based on what we're hearing from our stakeholders, what they need from us. So really this emphasis on cleanliness downtown and the fact that our stakeholders aren't feeling, they're feeling worse about it this year than they were last year. Anecdotally for me, I was feeling a little bit better, so I was frankly surprised by this. But as we move forward, where are we investing our dollars? We're asking for your partnership with the downtown maintenance worker to continue to help with that cleanliness downtown. So concerns downtown overall. So we have 5 years of survey work here. What I want to point out to you here is for the last 2 years, well, I'll start out overall. So the top 4, and our respondents could select 3 of these when they took the survey, and there were probably 12 or 14 options for them, were people having mental health crises, trash, litter, graffiti, and hygiene, people not having access to permanent shelter, and public drug use. For the last 2 years, public drug use has replaced people not having access to permanent shelter as the 3rd ranked concern in the survey. And I think some of that is the work that you've been doing with the capacity for our houseless community. So we asked a similar question different ways in our survey. One of the questions we asked was, which one of the following was the one most important service that you believe the Olympia Downtown Alliance should focus on over the next year? Enhanced safety hospitality. For us, that translates to the Downtown Guide Program in terms of direct services. I think for you, it translates to walkie patrol, crisis response unit, arguably as well. Second on that list was economic development, and that's the first time we've seen that so high ranked on this list. So we're always trying to extrapolate what the data means. What it could mean to us is feeling a little bit better about safety, maybe a little bit better about cleanliness. That one slide didn't show it. But we're ready to start to fill some of these vacant spaces downtown and to put our money there to focus on that. Third is that enhanced maintenance piece. We asked directly about the Downtown Guide Program, how our downtown stakeholders were feeling about it. Is it a positive factor in supporting the safe environment downtown? So 84% of respondents agreed that yes, it is. So our own stakeholders downtown are feeling good about the program. They're seeing us out there. They're seeing the difference that it's making within the downtown. We asked another question about would downtown benefit from increases to the Downtown Guide Program? Same percentage said yes, we want to see those increases to the Downtown Guide Program. So I mentioned that we have a collector app. Our downtown guides track data. So we've got 4 of them out there now. We operate 7 days a week, almost 100 hours a week. We're out there. So we're out there from early in the morning till usually about 8 or 9 at night, depending on the night. On Mondays, we have 1 guide on. Tuesdays as well. Wednesday through Saturday, we have 3 guides on because those are our peak hours. When we look at our geofencing data for downtown, when are people coming downtown? It's Friday, Saturday, the highest numbers, and then Thursday, Sunday. We've got 2 guides on Sunday. So we're really trying to adjust for what our business community needs, what our customers and visitors want downtown. When those guides are out there with their smartphones, they use their collector app, and every engagement that they have, they log. So we're tracking that and trying to figure out where the trends are downtown. From the far left there, you've got May of each year from 2020 to 2024. And we could pull any month, but we're talking about a month because there is seasonality downtown. May look different than January in terms of impacts downtown and what's going on downtown. And that may look different than October. So apples to apples. When we look at trespass engagements, and those are our guides, often in the morning, engaging houseless individuals that may be camped in an alcove, and we're greeting them, we are waking them up, and getting them going up for their day. So we did 117 of those in May of 2020. It dropped a little bit in May of 2021, but since then it went up, and now we're trending downwards again. So we only did 28 trespasses in alcoves and otherwise in May of 2024. You see similar trends for provision of food and water. So often when we're doing trespass engagement or when we're just coming across individuals who look like they're in crisis, we'll offer them food and water. We only provided food and water 9 times in May of 2024, as opposed to a high of 129 times in May of 2020. Homeless outreach, similar trend line. I won't read you the numbers, but we're headed in the same direction. I will mention as well, in May, we were down 1 guide in May, short-staffed, but we did have 3 guides as opposed to the other Mays when we had 2 guides. So we were 50%, we had a 50% higher staffing this year, but yet our numbers were lower from a trespass, provision of food and water, homeless outreach perspective. Friendly engagements, predictably, were up. And a friendly engagement is they're walking down the street, greeting anyone that comes past them, asking them if they need anything, if they've been to downtown, where they can find a good craft beer or a street taco or whatever it is, but making them feel welcome downtown. So actions taken, this was May versus the monthly average, some of the same. So, one point we like to make is our guides are really there to help kind of triage situations in downtown. Often, given the frequency that we're out there, that 7 days a week, almost 100 hours a week, we may be the first point of contact for individuals downtown. And often, we are working with individuals, and this may be someone in crisis within the community, and we end up handling that situation almost 100% of the time. Another way to put it is, we're not taxing city resources during that time either. We're allowing crisis response unit to work with individuals, that are in crisis and maybe need a next level, level of assistance. OPD is also freed up to do other things within our community as well. Referral to social service organizations is part of our overall engagements in May. It was 2% versus an average rolling 12-month average of 10%. And then provision of food and water, as you can see, as we talked about, was down as well. So encounters overall, more of the same, from what I presented earlier. So from a homeless outreach perspective, May was down over the 12-month rolling average. Friendly engagements down a little bit, trespass engagements down, et cetera. So I could roll the data out over the guide program and our vibrancy survey all day, but I just had 10 minutes. So happy to answer any questions. I appreciate Jay's partnership as the city manager and just overall the city's partnership with the guide program and really helping to create that sense of vibrancy downtown overall.
Thanks, Todd. Any questions from council? Councilmember Gilman, followed by Councilmember Madrone.
So the Finance Committee did have an opportunity at our, I believe it was the June meeting, to have a good conversation about this, and we strongly recommend continuing to support all of these services, but we agreed with the city manager that at this moment, what we have is one-time funding available as the funds are coming in from the Proposition 1. So we both strongly supported this particular proposal and also hope that we'll continue to work to find ways to support, especially the trees lit up. Come on, that's pretty amazing. So that was, that was where finance was at, and I certainly agreed and was part of that decision. So.
Councilmember Madrone.
Thanks so much for being here, Todd. And thanks so much for Summerfest, too. That was a lot of fun. It brought a lot of people downtown, people that I don't usually bump into. And I just see so much value that you and your organization bring to this community. So thanks for all of that.
That's the fun part of the job.
Yeah, right? And +1 on the tree lights, because I also hear that from constituents during the winter that, when downtown is lit up, they want to be there. They feel safe. They feel invited and welcome downtown. So really excited to see that on the list here. And I also really value that you leveraged this opportunity with the city to go out and get some matching funds from some of the, those downtown who are really benefiting from these investments. So thank you so much for doing that extra work to leverage the resources we're able to provide so that you could do more with it. And I guess my question is, kind of a follow-up with what Councilmember Gilman was just saying. Jay said several times that it is one-time funding. And I'm curious, Todd, from your perspective, I know there's some conversations that can happen with the city on that, but from your perspective at ODA, what are some of your long-term plans to keep building up this really awesome momentum we have for downtown?
Yeah, so from a downtown guide program perspective, arguably maintenance worker as well. As I mentioned, we started the downtown guide program in 2018 through the investments of downtown property owners and small business owners. We have not raised any rates since then. We have not expanded the area appreciably since then. So I think there's space to have that conversation with those stakeholders. And maybe positive momentum there through the successes of the guide program. And they're also seeing that you are willing to invest in this program, and that means a lot to them, the commitment from the city and that public-private partnership. So I think it's an iterative conversation with them where they're looking to you to help support the program, and you're looking to them for that match. So hopefully that continues into the future. Unfortunately, as you all know, we worked on the Downtown Improvement District for the last 4 or 5 years, and it came to an end in February. It was an unsuccessful effort. Having said that, we built a lot of good relationships with property owners who we learned wanted to invest in downtown and wanted to be part of solutions in creating this environment downtown. And certainly it's in their best interest that downtown is successful as well. So I think further exploring those partnerships and understanding while we may not be able to get to a formal downtown improvement district or property assessment district that comes through the city, how do we leverage property owners so they contribute to a program like this?
Great, thanks so much.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, Todd, first of all, thank you. You and I talk all the time, and I'm eternally grateful to you because the ODA quite literally helps us enforce our ordinances. You're a real partner to the city, and I think that unfortunately these are one-time funds, and I know that that probably sounds like, you know, to any community members that might be listening, like, what does that mean, or what does that mean for the future? And to be honest, I think our community would feel the impact if you weren't able to do what you do. So I just so appreciate that. I do have a question about your stats on cleanliness. I'm curious if those numbers, are they before we had a walking crisis response unit downtown and before we do have an assigned or designated crisis responder now for the city? So are those numbers prior to the implementation of that?
No, so I'm trying to remember when crisis response unit hit the ground, but we did the survey typically in the fall for the first 3 years. So late September, early October. This last go around, we did it May of this year. So it's only been, the information is only a few months old.
Okay, yeah, I believe walking crew started in January, if I remember correctly, yeah. So, okay, that's helpful.
Yeah. Can I jump in there?
Sure.
So one of the things that Todd mentioned in his slide is that graffiti has really picked up. And we have some contracts to abate, and they're pretty successful with the property owners who say, yes, please help me. We do have some properties where the property owners have a lot of graffiti and aren't giving permission for it to be abated. So it's just a conversation we will probably need to have in the future is how far does the city want to go in terms of enforcement around responsibilities for graffiti abatement. I'm not asking you for anything tonight, but I just want to point out it's a conversation we likely need to have because I think Todd's doing all he can, and he's kind of reported to me he's up against a point where he needs some help from the city to get further graffiti abatement done. But that's got to play into some of those numbers.
Well, we have our code, right? Which is that we can enforce our code.
We do, and again, without getting into a lot of specifics, as we got into 2020 and beyond, we've been a little lax in being out enforcing that portion of the code because of the impacts on businesses. Again, I think it's a future conversation we just need to have.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess that's all the questions I have. I will say that wintertime, especially, back to the lights, because everybody's talking about that. The most important thing about that is that I think it lifts the mood of people in our community in the darkest season, which is so important. And I think it's, for those of us who know who's affiliated with that, it's kind of like a precursor of what's to come when summer comes. So quite literally, I think it tells that story, I think, of our downtown. And I look forward to supporting you, supporting us in the coming months. So thank you.
Appreciate the partnership.
Any other questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I won't say too much more. I'm looking forward to passing this tonight. I'm in full support of it. The cleanliness is actually something that has been on my mind quite a bit as a downtown resident. I also think, we could probably like pick apart and ask more because we're so interested, right? But I think probably the timing of the survey, that would make sense too, just during warmer weather, you know? I see a lot of snacks on the ground that I don't usually see during the fall, you know, just in clothing, just as an example. I've been thinking about the ODA actually just recently, and I know that, this is probably not the forum for a full conversation, but I think about the broken windows as well. I think about safety in the evening also being, yes, the beautiful lights that give it that inviting and that feeling of safety. And I also think about, I would love for businesses to be open later and for it to make sense to them to be open later. So I wonder what that would look like. I think about, I think many of us think about these empty buildings downtown and how to approach that. So I'm glad for our partnership with the ODA. I'm in full support of this. And thank you. Yeah, and I look forward to, I heard there's going to be an upcoming time to hang out and maybe a little bit of barbecue with you all.
I'll be forwarding that invite to you all. Yes.
Thank you. It's actually on our calendars already.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you there.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, so I need a motion. Councilmember Gilman.
I would move to approve the one-time funding request of the Olympia Downtown Alliance for $285,000 to support 4 programs: the Downtown Guide Program, Maintenance Worker Position, Graffiti Abatement Program, and Tree Lights.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Yes.
Okay. So that concludes our business on item 6C, or 6B rather. So we will move on to 6C, which is a climate program update. And here to present this evening is Dr. Pamela Braff, our Director of Climate Programs of the city. Dr. Braff, good to see you.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Good evening, members of council. Let me just get settled here. All right, so tonight, for the record, my name is Pamela Braff, Director of Climate Programs, and I'm here to give you all an update on what we've been doing in the climate program. So really excited to share what we've been working on. Before I start, I do want to say these are highlights. This is not everything. If it was a comprehensive update, we would be here for way longer than any of you want to be here. So just want to make sure you all know that. So just to get started, what is it that the climate program does? What's our role at the city? We work across all of the departments, both internally and externally, with partners across the region to advance the city's climate mitigation and adaptation goals. So when we're talking about climate adaptation, we're talking about the fact that we know our climate has already changed. Extreme weather and hazards are becoming more severe, and they're going to continue getting more severe. So what do we do to adapt to those changes? How are we managing the impacts of climate change in our community, both today and in the future? So that's the work around climate adaptation. There's also a piece around climate mitigation, and that is when we're talking about how do we avoid the unmanageable? So how do we stop the trend of ever-growing greenhouse gas emissions, both locally and globally, to make sure that our future consequences are not as severe as they would be if we didn't take any action at all. So when we're talking about the climate program at the city, we're thinking about both adaptation, sometimes called resilience, and mitigation, or the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Sometimes the work that we do helps both adaptation and mitigation, and sometimes it's focused on one or the other, but it's really important that when we're talking about climate change, we're taking this holistic picture of thinking about both sides of that equation. So for your updates tonight, I'm going to share a little bit with you all about our work along climate mitigation, some of our work around climate adaptation, and then I'm just going to give you a little teaser about what we're working on with the comprehensive plan climate element. So to get started, Let's talk about mitigation. That's the actions we're taking to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change here in Olympia. So just to remind you all, the Olympia City Council has made a couple of commitments to address climate change. The first is a regional commitment. This was adopted jointly across the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County, and it's the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And it includes regionally consistent targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across our whole county, 45% below 2015 levels by 2030, and 85% below 2015 levels by 2050. So this is what we're working on as a region. But Olympia has gone beyond that and said here locally in Olympia, we want to do more. We want to go further. And the city has made two commitments there. One is the Olympia Climate Inheritance Resolution, which was really a commitment to the youth of Olympia back in 2019 to achieve net zero emissions by 2040. And then in 2022, the city also joined the Cities Race to Zero, which is a global commitment of cities all working to achieve net zero emissions by 2040 and take some interim actions by 2030. So those are emission reduction targets. We're not on track to meet those targets right now. That's not unique to Olympia. Most of the world is in that same position. And so what this graph is showing you is at the regional level what our historic greenhouse gas emissions have been. This is for Thurston County, and it's comparing from 2010 up to our most recent greenhouse gas inventory, which was in 2022. And you can see here those blue dots, those are showing the regional greenhouse gas reduction goals, and then that yellow star at the bottom, the gold star, is showing what our Olympia net zero target would look like. So our emissions have been increasing. They've increased since our baseline year of 2015, increased 6.6%. So we know things are on the rise. The good news is it does look like emissions have started to decrease since 2019, so we may have reached a peak and now we're starting to come down. So that's probably good progress, but we'll need a couple more years of data to know if that's an ongoing trend or if that's just a one-time blip. So we're waiting to see more. And I just want to acknowledge this looks a little bit different from the last time I presented a greenhouse gas inventory to you all. That's because two reasons. First, that was locally just for the city of Olympia, and it ended in 2021. So you can see that same dip in 2021 here. And if you all recall, I said, I don't know if that will hold true when people start driving a lot again. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. We're seeing a significant increase in vehicle miles traveled, and that's resulting in increasing greenhouse gas emissions across the region. One, I guess, good piece of news is that per capita emissions are still decreasing. So part of the increasing emissions that we are seeing in the region is due to population growth. So we are seeing a decrease in per capita emissions, and we'll just continue to track this over time. So where do those emissions come from? The largest source of emissions in Thurston County and also in Olympia is from our built environment. And so that includes residential and commercial buildings, and this is really including all of the energy that we use to heat and cool and power our buildings. And the second largest source is from the transportation sector. And so that's really related to the energy we use to make our cars move, so gasoline and that type of thing, gasoline and diesel. And together, those two sectors, buildings and transportation, they make up almost 90% of our total emissions profile. Again, this is really common for most communities in the US. And it shows us where we need to do the most work within those two sectors, buildings and energy and transportation. And so the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, this is our regional framework for how we take action. And it includes a couple of key focus areas. And a couple that I just want to point out is there's one focus area around greening our grid, and that has to do with producing renewable energy. The city does not produce our own energy. Most people in the city of Olympia, nearly all people, purchase their energy from Puget Sound Energy. And so for us, that means supporting PSC's transition to renewable energy and producing 100% renewable energy that we can then leverage in our buildings and in our vehicles to help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions associated with our energy consumption. Equally important, though, is also reducing our energy demand. It's going to be really difficult. It's totally doable, but it's going to be really difficult to produce all of that renewable energy. So the more that we can reduce our energy demand, the easier it's going to be to produce enough renewable energy to decarbonize our entire economy. And so that's really what we're focusing on here, producing renewable energy, decreasing our energy demand, and then shifting every end use possible onto that renewable energy supply. I also just want to add that all of the solutions that we need to meet those goals are already available to us. We don't have to wait for new technology. We don't have to wait for new things to be developed. So we know what we need to do. We have what we need to do. It's just a matter of putting all of those pieces into place. So I just want to share with you all a couple of highlights of what we've been doing to help advance those goals. And I kind of pulled together a range of different things that we're working on here. So the first one I want to cover with you all is Energize Olympia, which is our heat pump program that we're really very proud of. Energize Olympia is a ductless heat pump group purchase program which brings together all sorts of different incentives and outreach and resources for the community to make it easier and faster and more affordable to install ductless heat pumps in residential homes in Olympia. And so this program really helps folks all from the whole point of kind of selecting a system, selecting an installer, finding all of the available rebates and discounts and incentives that are available for you, negotiating a discounted price from a local installer for those heat pumps, and really pulling it all together. And we provide that one-on-one support throughout the whole process. And one of the really cool things about this program is that it's supported by a partnership between the City of Olympia and Habitat for Humanity. So we work really closely with Habitat for Humanity on this program, and they help to run all of the fully subsidized installations that we can provide for low and moderate income households through this program. And so we ran it for the first time last year. And so 2023, that was our pilot year, and it was really quite successful. We exceeded all of our pilot goals. We were able to install 67 heat pumps through that program. 22 of those installations were fully funded, and we know that 42 of the households who participated in that program converted to electricity from natural gas as their primary heating source. And almost all of the households who participated in that program didn't previously have cooling. So we know that it's also providing a really important resilience benefit for folks on those really hot days as well. And then we're also able to leverage a lot of external funding, things through like PSE rebates and other incentives that were available for market rate participants who are really self-funding their own installations through the program. And we talked to a lot of community members through the program. We did a lot of community outreach. We were tabling, we held workshops, and we engaged more than 500 community members through the duration of that program last summer. And we're getting ready to launch it again for 2024. So we'll have workshops coming, starting in the announcements coming out in the next couple of weeks to let folks know about how to get involved if they want to participate in the 2024 campaign. So that's just an example of one of our kind of programmatic approaches for reducing energy demand and converting to electric appliances. The other thing I want to share with you all is some updates on parking and EV charging. So you all know about this, but I think it's helpful to see it all together. This past year, Olympia City Council adopted some new requirements related to parking reductions and EV charging, and this has some really important benefits, and we see these policies as being really going hand in hand. So parking reductions help with reducing parking demand, which helps with reducing VMT and the use of personal vehicles to get around town. So we see this as really a really important piece of our puzzle for reducing transportation-associated emissions. But we also recognize that we're still going to need cars for a while. They're not going away anytime soon. So whenever we are providing parking, it's important that that parking is also supported by EV charging. And so the new EV-ready parking requirements, which were adopted by Council last year, basically mean that whenever there's parking provided, there's going to be some amount of EV-ready parking made available or EV charging. So EV-ready just means that you're not going to need to go back later and dig up any concrete or put in new electrical or that type of thing. So you don't need to install the charger now, but you're making it charger ready for the future. And that's really meant to help facilitate growing future demand for EV charging in the community. And the really great thing about that is if particularly for multifamily housing, when they're installing EV-ready parking now, we can then come back later and help them out with grant funding and find ways to connect housing with grant funding to then go in and install those EV chargers. We've also been working on some new outreach programs. This is one that we are really excited about through a partnership with the Timberland Regional Library, where we've been curating different climate media for folks to consume. So we started with a climate reading list, and then we had a climate film list, and then we had an event at the library where we showed one of the films. And we had a panel, and we had a bunch of community members attend, and really folks just wanting to connect and talk about their concerns and hopes and dreams for the future as it relates to climate change. We've got something for everyone. If you are new to climate and you want your basic 101, if you want to read some hardcore climate nonfiction or fiction, or you're looking for something for young kids who are just kind of getting started, we've got recommendations for a whole bunch of things. So you can find that reading list at the Olympia Timberland Library's website. We also have a blog post on Actually Olympia, which is the city's blog, which highlights some of our favorites, some of our favorite films and some of our favorite books, and you can kind of see why we love them. So if you're looking for some summer reading, highly recommend checking that out. And we are working on continuing to further develop that partnership and look for more opportunities to continue partnering with the library on future programs and continuing to develop that reading list. As I mentioned before, we also work really closely with regional partners on the implementation of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. So this past year was a really big year for the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative. We updated our regional implementation strategy to really clarify roles and responsibilities and expectations for local implementation of climate action, as well as how we coordinate as a region. This had really been a challenge since we first started of how do we work together to get this work done? And so we spent a lot of time working through that and coming up for some guidance on how to do that. And then we, kind of using that guidance, we ended up forming the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative to really formalize that partnership and formalize the way in which we work together in the future and to continue to provide support for ongoing regional coordination and collaboration. As a part of that work, we also established a regional community advisory work group to provide community perspectives and feedback on the work we're doing as a region to advance the actions laid out in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. That's a 15-member community advisory work group, which is really meant to provide a whole range of community perspectives on the work we're doing around climate change. And it's been really great to have that work group formed, and we're about almost a year into its current iteration now. And then another kind of corner piece of the way we are now working together as a region is we're continuing to do ongoing regional coordination, but we're also focusing on what we're calling annual regional initiatives, where we identify one, sometimes two, regional initiatives that we're going to work on together over the next year to advance as a region all together. And so these can take different shapes. So in 2023, we hosted our first annual retreat, which really brought together all of the members of the collaborative. So that's representatives from Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County, as well as our community advisory work group and staff from each of those jurisdictions. And through that process back in 2023, we selected 2 regional initiatives that the collaborative is now working on this year. One was developing a model ordinance for home energy score disclosure policy. And so what we're working on right now is developing that model ordinance language. We have some community engagement going on later this summer, and we'll be bringing that back to council throughout the process, and then early next year, all of the jurisdictions at the same time. And the end goal of that would be that we would adopt regionally consistent policies for home energy score disclosure. And the purpose of that is to make sure that when folks are buying a new home, they are able to understand what their energy burden is going to be, what the cost of operating that home is going to be, and also get recommendations for cost-effective improvements that help reduce that energy demand. So that's the Home Energy Score project. And then the other one is a regional energy efficiency and electrification campaign. And this program is really, so we're designing it this year. Again, it would be implemented in 2025. It's really meant to build off of the success of Energize Olympia and bring a broader suite of services, so electrification and energy efficiency, and make that available to to residents throughout Thurston County, not just residents of Olympia. So those are the two regional initiatives that we're working on this year. Lots of work happening to further develop those, and we'll have more to show about that in the coming months. So those are my climate mitigation updates. I want to switch a little bit and talk now about adaptation and the steps that we're taking to manage the impacts of climate change and build community-wide resilience in Olympia. And I want to cover just two highlights here. One is our sea level rise response, and the other is the climate risk and vulnerability assessment that we started last year. So the Olympia Sea Level Rise Response Plan was developed through a partnership with the City of Olympia, the Port of Olympia, and Lock Clean Water Alliance, and it was completed in March of 2019. And this plan is really meant to be a formal community plan for how we adapt to the impacts of sea level rise in downtown Olympia. And it looks at all sorts of different things. This plan goes out to the year 2100 to really plan for those long-term impacts within the city. And there's been a lot of work going on to implement that plan over the past couple of years, but I just want to highlight a couple of key assumptions associated with this planning process. The first is that we're going to need an incremental approach to protect from the impacts of sea level rise in downtown Olympia. The solutions that we'll need in 2100 are not the solutions that we need today, but it also doesn't mean that we can wait until 2100 to take action. So really thinking about what does a phased approach look like, and the plan outlines that actions to be taken in the near term, midterm, and long term. Given all of the infrastructure that's downtown, including things like our wastewater treatment facilities, the Port of Olympia, and all of that exists downtown, wholesale retreat is just not a pragmatic solution for our community. And finally, we're really lucky in a lot of ways in that we have a lot of public property along the shoreline. And so that makes it a lot easier for us to manage that adaptation response. And a lot of the whole plan is focused on implementing strategies on public property wherever it's possible. And so I just want to remind folks that this is not a problem for tomorrow or a problem for the future. The impacts of sea level rise in Olympia are really right here and now. This is from that King Tide event that we had in 2022, which was the highest tide ever recorded in the city of Olympia. And we know that flooding events like this are just going to become more common, of greater magnitude, and of more frequent duration in the coming years. And so what we're trying to do here with the implementation of the Sea Level Rise Response Plan is mitigate those impacts to the greatest extent possible. So some of the good news is that we have nearly completed the implementation of all of the near-term adaptation strategies. So those were strategies that were meant to be implemented within the first 5 years of adopting the plan, and they were just meant to adapt to the flooding that we were already experiencing. And we've already seen a lot of benefits from implementing those strategies. One example of some of the work that was done was the installation of tide gates on stormwater outfalls to prevent backflow flooding through that stormwater system, which can pop up on streets not even right next to the shoreline, kind of a ways away. And so that has been really successful in preventing a lot of the flooding on roadways that we've been seeing. And so those near-term actions are mostly complete. We still have some informational gaps that were left over from developing the plan, and so we're working to fill those right now to help inform next steps and how we continue to move this work forward. One of these is looking at the impacts of sea level rise on groundwater conditions. One of the things that can happen when you have sea level rise is it forces your groundwater levels to rise, and that can cause flooding in unexpected locations. It can have challenges for infrastructure, and so we need to understand what those impacts are going to be in Olympia before we can figure out how we potentially respond to those. So we're working on that right now to do Lot is leading this project to look at, do some more groundwater modeling and understand what those impacts might be. We've also started looking at how we're going to monitor land subsidence within the city, particularly in the downtown peninsula. We know that downtown is sinking because a lot of it was built on fill. and kind of old, unconsolidated dredge material. And so as that sinks, it means we experience a faster rate of sea level rise. And so we want to know how fast that's happening, and if there are places where it's happening more quickly than others, and how that impacts when we need to implement certain strategies. So we're working on that right now. And we just completed a first phase of a funding and governance evaluation to really investigate what options are available for long-term public financing, mechanisms for sea level rise adaptation, what are the different approaches for public-private partnerships that we could utilize to help make sure we're able to implement these strategies. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done there that we're going to be continuing over the next couple of years, but that was just our first step to start looking at some of those questions. So the sea level rise work is underway. A lot of that has been led by Public Works, the stormwater utility, and they're continuing to be an active partner in implementing a lot of these response strategies. But we know that sea level rise is not our only climate hazard in Olympia. We are also vulnerable to things like high temperatures and extreme heat, more frequent wildfires, and particularly wildfire smoke from wildfires that aren't even in Olympia, and just generally more extreme precipitation events and extreme storms that can lead to other types of flooding throughout the city. But we hadn't done a holistic analysis of what does this mean for the city, what are our specific vulnerabilities, how are things changing here locally, how are they likely to change in the future. So last year we initiated a broader climate risk and vulnerability assessment, CRVA, because that's a lot of words, to look at the ways that the Olympia community is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change more broadly, so all of these different stressors. And so we started that last year. The stars here are meant to just highlight the 3 phases of work that we were planning to do with this climate risk and vulnerability assessment. First, explore what are our local climate hazards, assess the vulnerability and risk to those hazards, and then start to evaluate options for adapting to them. And so in the process of doing the climate risk and vulnerability assessment, we provided a lot of different opportunities for community engagement, for our community members to weigh in about the ways that they are being impacted by climate change, that they expect to be impacted by climate change, and what they're worried about to help drive that process. And so we had both in-person and digital engagement opportunities. And one of them, I feel most of you all had an opportunity to participate in, was our climate mural, where we had this really beautiful, large collaborative mural that Carrie Ziegler painted for us. And we cut it up into 200 tiles, and we were able to bring it with us to events, and people were able to share their ideas and their concerns about climate change. And the purpose of this was really to help folks know that you're not alone. We all have these same fears. And also to get us some valuable information along the way about what people are concerned about. And so after it was done, I want to show you a picture of the reassembled mural that was hanging in City Hall. You could see this from the outside when you walked by. It coincided with some community events last year. It's currently hanging on the 2nd floor if you ever want to come by and take another look at it. And so this was our Risk to Resilience mural. And it was an important part of our engagement process that we're continuing to carry forward. We also had a community project team made up of city staff and community members who participated throughout the process of the climate risk and vulnerability assessment the purpose of that was to provide more in-depth guidance throughout the whole assessment process, kind of much more richer engagement than you can get from, like a little 2-minute, 3-minute conversation with someone. And so they participated throughout the entire process and helped inform the risk assessment. And we were anticipating finishing that report fall of last year, but then in the summer, we got some guidance from the state around how cities should be updating their comprehensive plans to include climate change. And it included some language around doing climate risk and vulnerability assessments. So we decided to pause this work to make sure that everything that we were doing there was fully consistent with the new state requirements, to make sure that we weren't going back and redoing any work there. And so we have since picked that back up, and everything that we did during the CRVA, it's not going to waste, because all of that is going to be integrated into our comprehensive plan climate element. And so this is the last little piece that I have for you all today. What are we doing with our comp plan climate element? And so I'll just start by saying the state legislature has recently adopted some new requirements related to climate change planning for local governments. And what they did was they added a new goal to the state's Growth Management Act, which requires us to plan for climate change, for greenhouse gas reduction, and climate resilience. And so the overarching goals of this is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce vehicle miles traveled, improve climate preparedness, response, and recovery efforts, and to make sure that in everything that we're doing, we're maximizing co-benefits and prioritizing environmental justice in the development and implementation of these policies and programs. And so after the state adopted these new requirements, Washington State Department of Commerce put out some guidance for how cities can implement this. So Olympia is among the first cohort, slew of jurisdictions that are required to implement these new climate planning requirements within our comprehensive plan update. And so we're working on that right now. We have interim guidance from draft final interim guidance, I think is what it's called, that came out from Commerce in December of last year. And it lays out two different sub-elements that we need to include. The first is a greenhouse gas reduction sub-element. And so the requirement is for jurisdictions to show how they will meet the statewide greenhouse gas reduction goals and how they can contribute to that. And so it includes 3 steps, first starting with a greenhouse gas inventory, then developing greenhouse gas reduction goals and policies based on those emissions inventory results. Good news for us is we've already done that greenhouse gas inventory. We already have a really strong regional climate mitigation plan that we can leverage in the development of those goals and policies for the greenhouse gas reduction sub-element. So that one is well underway. And then we have the resilience sub-element, and this one is going to require a bit more work for us to do. There's a couple of steps here. The first is exploring climate impacts, then taking a look at all of our existing, well, not all, many of our existing plans and policies to see how they address or could be improved to better address climate resilience, and then doing a deep dive on our vulnerability and risk. After we look at all of those pieces, then we can go in and adapt policies or develop new goals and policies to meet those, address those resilience challenges. So we're in the, what would look like step 3 right here, which is finalizing the assessment of vulnerability and risk. So picking up from that climate risk and vulnerability assessment, wrapping up that work, and then we'll be moving on shortly to help, to start working on developing the goals and policies to address that. We have a lot of community engagement planned for this, starting later this year and then going on into next year. We had to revise the timeline a little bit, so I don't have an updated timeline for you all and what that looks like. But for folks that might be listening, if they want to learn more, you can go to olympiawa.gov/climate2045. That'll take you to the Engage Olympia page where you can learn more about the update process, and we'll have more information about opportunities to guide that process and provide feedback along the way coming there shortly. And with that, I would just like to say thank you all for your time and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Braff. Questions?
We all do.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, followed by Councilmember Vanderpool, followed by Councilmember Madrone, followed by Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you so much for just the highlights. I have, thank you for all of the work that you're doing and the team that you're leading, and I'd love to hear more about that. I'm also feeling, I don't know what the right adjective would be, like excited, relieved, content, I don't know. But I'm thinking about Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative. I attended just went kind of around the time that you first started, and was the time that I was also first starting, and I was attending a lot of those as an active alternate, and I found myself frustrated, right? And I really openly shared that with you, and I just feel like what I'm hearing about now and what you're presenting is like a full turnaround into something that is working well. Because I think that I think what you're telling us is that it's working well, and that's lovely, and there's even more opportunities for people to contribute. So I guess kudos and thank you for staying on and being a part of that and helping course correct, I would say. So just 2 questions. One is about your team. I'd love to just know a little bit about your team. I know we've met them a couple of times. I think there was like one position that maybe like wasn't funded, or wasn't sustainably funded or something like that. So just recognizing all of the work you do. So I just wonder about the team and how that's going support-wise. And I know that other jurisdictions also have are starting to have their own climate programs. And so I guess I'm just thinking of support for you and collaboration. So that's my first question.
Sure, yeah. So at the regional level, one of the things that really helped was that all of the jurisdictions in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative have now hired either half-time or full-time staff members to focus specifically on climate work. So that's just made it a lot easier for us to collaborate as a region and have folks who have the time to move this work forward. And I don't think we would be in a position of having 2 regional initiatives that were moving forward if we didn't have that level of regional staffing. So that's been a really big improvement, kind of region-wide. So the City of Olympia, we've also been lucky to be able to hire some new staff to also work on climate at the city. So in addition to my position, we have 2 relatively new full-time positions. One is a building decarbonization program manager, and that person focuses exclusively on developing programs and policies to decarbonize our built environment, so reducing greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. So they work on Energize and several other programs and policies related to reducing emissions from buildings. They also work really closely with the city's housing team, because everything that we're doing, we're making sure that we're supporting each other wherever we can. The other new-ish position is a climate program specialist, and that person is helping with things like greenhouse gas inventories, community outreach, newsletters, all of the outreach and engagement that goes into programs like Energize Olympia and all of the FaceTime that we need to make that happen. So those are 2 other fully funded positions that we have. We also, over the past 2 years, have hosted AmeriCorps Civic Spark Fellows. And so that's through an AmeriCorps program where we have fellows hosted at the city for 11 months at a time who work on specific projects and kind of support the work that we're doing. We're not able to host a fellow next year, but it's something that we hope to do again in the future. And then we also currently have a project-funded position that's partially funded through grant funding to specifically focus on supporting the development of the comprehensive plan and the resilience sub-element, the resilience sub-element for the climate chapter, as well as supporting and facilitating the Sea Level Rise Collaborative, which is another partnership that takes a lot of care and attention to keep that moving forward.
Thank you. That has grown so much. That has grown so much and under your leadership. And then I have another question about the climate framework. So you're familiar, of course. So everything that comes before the City Council, for anyone that's listening in, goes through every staff report. You should see a climate analysis along with an equity analysis. So at our last mid-year retreat, Council received a presentation and a bit of time talking about the equity framework, and I'm curious about the climate framework and what involvement with your team looks like, what guidance for that. How's it going?
Yeah, well, it's going really well. I mean, sometimes it's harder than others, like all things. So we launched that, I believe it was January of last year is when that became effective. And leading up to that, we had done really a tremendous amount of training with city staff for both the climate and the equity frameworks to help folks understand why we were doing this, how to do it, how to go through the process. And so now those have been in place for about 1.5 years. And there are definitely some types of work that they apply much more clearly to than others. And so that's one of the challenges that we're still working through when you try to create a one-size-fits-all. never fits all. And so trying to just figure out how to work through some of that. Early on, we had regular office hours, just kind of like scheduled, where staff could drop in and ask questions, but we found that over time, after the first couple of months, people stopped coming. They started going to each other with questions, that type of thing, which is really exactly what we want to see, with staff supporting other staff without needing to come to the climate team for guidance. That being said, we still get a lot of questions, not necessarily on the climate framework, but how do we address climate change within this project? How do we address climate change within this initiative? Do you see, what would you do here, that type of thing? And so it's not exactly under the kind of lens of the framework, but I see that as very related when staff are reaching out to us and asking, how do we incorporate climate change in this work? And so we have a lot of conversations with that on an ad hoc and as needed basis.
Thank you. That's really helpful in helping me understand like where we are with it. And I know other colleagues are waiting to chat with you. Thanks.
Councilmember Vanderpool, followed by Councilmember Madrone.
So I appreciate all the work you guys are doing. Trying to juggle between mitigation and reduction is quite a bit of two different hats. So, I'm going to kind of speak from both what we need to do in Olympia and what we need to do regionally, because they're kind of two different things. A couple comments and then a couple questions that the public has asked me recently around this. So I do appreciate that we're moving towards a kind of an aggressive strategy and understanding, the built environment and the effect of what we do locally. It's not just a matter of replacing gas cars with EVs, but it's also kind of transitioning to as the population grows, to other modes of transportation. It's the built environment, it's equity, it's all of those various aspects that kind of overlap. And so, speaking regionally, the other demand, it seems like, is that I've spoken to lots of youth members that have very strong opinions about, we should be doing things a lot more aggressively. And that's understandable because they're going to be living in the future that some of us may not be around for. And so what we're doing now is an investment that we need to make now or yesterday, essentially. And so because of that, some of the youth are like, we should be doing more staff. We should be trying to potentially lobby the state stronger for more action, and, thinking about how many staff members you have, how many staff members are on the regional. I'm constantly wondering, what ways can we come up with more funding to have more staff? Because there's so much of an overlap between these different issues that affect the climate, right, that are beyond just sea rise strategy and others. So our community planning development, what they do affects climate change. What they do in transportation affects climate change. And so I'd be very curious to hear your view and opinion on, how do we connect these different departments when they all affect climate change?
A big part of what we do, and a big part of what I'm able to do more now that we have some more staff to help share the load, is working across departments. We know that that's really important. I was sharing some highlights of just the work that we're doing within the climate team, but this is not capturing what's happening in public works and transportation. It's not capturing what's happening in parks and community planning and development and all of those departments. So that ongoing cross-departmental coordination is really very important. And it's really critical to making any of this work. My team alone, the climate team alone, is not going to achieve Olympia's greenhouse gas reduction goals, but when we work across all of the city departments, we can make a really big impact. So that's an area where we are doing constantly kind of evolving and figuring out how to make that work better. A couple of years ago when I first started, I tried to launch a citywide climate action team, kind of really bringing together staff across all departments. And it just didn't quite work the way we wanted to. And so we learned a lot through the process. We're reassessing, and we're planning to kick that back off again next year with some lessons learned, a smaller, more targeted, focused group. And the goal there is to really make sure that each department sees their role in this work, and each department understands how they contribute to our overall greenhouse gas reduction, and we have a shared vision for how we're going to get there. One of the things that's actually helping us is our comp plan update. Through the process of developing the climate element, we're working across all of departments. We're going to be integrating those greenhouse gas reduction and climate resilience goals and policies across many of the chapters. And through that process, I think we're helping to build that shared cross-departmental buy-in of what needs to happen and who needs to do what. And we're just going to continue to work and support and coordinate the best we can to make it happen.
Cool. So to expand off of that, I know that the requirements in the comp plan updates are based on somewhat of the city size and population and area. I'm wondering, have we ever considered maybe as we work on these climate updates, thinking about the city size of the future as we're doing them, maybe even being stricter on ourselves in a way, within reason, within staff hours, that meet the needs in the future update when population increases?
So the greenhouse gas reduction goals that we have to achieve are not based on per capita. They're an absolute reduction. So we need to achieve those greenhouse gas reduction goals or show progress towards achieving those regardless of what happens with population growth into the future.
So it's not like some of the other chapters where they require that. Okay. Now, I have a very specific question someone asked me about the other day. I didn't really know, so I said, I'm not the subject matter expert, I'll ask. So, as we see sea rise, one of the issues that's been brought up to me is that artisanal wells will rise with the sea rise. I might have asked you this before in an email. I'm very curious about that interesting aspect of them potentially also rising as we're raising the downtown, or rising the downtown, not raising the downtown.
So we have to get into some deep hydrogeology here to answer that question. Short answer is we don't exactly know, but there's a lot of things that could influence it. One thing that's important to note, when we're talking about the impacts of sea level rise on groundwater, we're talking about the unconfined shallow groundwater table, which means groundwater that kind of sits much closer to the surface. That's the groundwater that is most impacted by sea level rise. An artesian well, by definition, is groundwater that's much deeper and beneath the surface. And so those are two different essentially two different sources of groundwater. So generally speaking, not all the time, generally speaking, artesian wells are not impacted by sea level rise in the same way as the shallow unconfined groundwater level that we're talking about. They could actually be more impacted by things like, depending on how they're sourced, melting snowpack and changing conditions of snowpack availability and that type of thing, because some of them can be sourced by glaciers. What does this mean for the artesian well in Olympia? Or multiple artesian wells in Olympia? I don't know. We would have to do a whole, that's its own deep, very detailed analysis that we'd have to look at. Likely not impacted by sea level rise.
Thank you.
Councilmember Madrone, followed by Councilmember Gilman.
Well, I appreciate what you were just saying about working across departments and like the comprehensive plan and working across all of the chapters, because with our approach to the comprehensive plan, we're like, we don't need an equity chapter because equity's in every single chapter, yet we're required to have a climate chapter, but climate needs to be in every single chapter. And I was recently reviewing the Department of Ecology's draft climate resilience strategy, and one thing that I really appreciated about their strategy was the inclusion of food security there, and I think that's something that every community should be thinking about. A lot of climate resilience is responding to disruption, and it's not necessarily a disruption that is happening in our community, like with wildfire smoke. That could be a fire happening way far away, and it impacts our community, and it's the same thing with food security. There could be crop failures happening, and suddenly we don't know what we're going to eat around here. And so I just wanted to, mention that that's included in the draft climate resilience strategy for the state. And I think that that'll be a really important thing for us to be working through as we're talking about climate resilience.
Absolutely. That came up a couple of times as we were doing the climate risk and vulnerability assessment. So it's something that we're kind of bringing throughout the process.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gilman.
Well, so I'm sitting in kind of shock that I'm a strong supporter of the crisis we declared and the 3 promises that we made. First, that we'd get 45% reduction by 2030, and then through the inheritance resolution and through the city race to zero, we said we'd aim for net zero by 2040. 5 years into this effort, we're at plus 6.6%. So now we have to do 52% reduction in the next 5 years to meet our first goal. So I guess my question is, it's great, all these efforts to education. I'm hoping that the House Bill 1181 effort to do the mapping the reductions will have enough teeth that you'll come back with a big chart that says, here's the energy calorie budget per person in Olympia. And, you know, we'll just have to figure it out. At some point across this 10-year trajectory, we have to pivot to what might be other programs, what might be regulations, that running pilot projects halfway through a timeline. And I have to admit, I think as a builder, as a carpenter, so if I was assigned to demolish half of a building and I was halfway through my schedule and I hadn't actually demolished anything, but I had started a work group to study what kind of a committee to set up, I just don't know. So I'm glad that we're building these efforts. I'm glad that we've coaxed the other regional jurisdictions to join us. But if it's not at this halfway point, when is the moment that we start looking at a critical path to getting to that now 52% reduction in just over 5 years?
There's a lot there. Yeah. This is one of those things where you have to go slow to go fast, like truly. We as a region and as a city have been really resource constrained in an ability to do this work. We didn't have any positions focused on climate change until 3 years ago. It takes time to stand up the programs and develop the policies and bring them forward in order to implement anything. And so that's where we are right now. And I'm starting to see we're at this turning point, at least within the city, where we've had a program now for 3 years. We now have more than one person just focused on this effort. We're figuring out how to tap into state and federal grants, and we're starting to turn a curve where we are seeing more significant programs and policies and things that we're able to bring forward. That being said, it's still not enough. Like, I can just tell you that the resources that we have right now are not going to get us to those targets. Yeah. Realistically, getting there is going to take a very significant investment in staff and in funding and also likely regulatory actions to get us there. So I want to be really clear about that. We're making really good progress. We're seeing a lot of improvement, but it'll take significant investment to get to those targets.
Thank you, Pamela. Could you tell me that the House Bill 1181 greenhouse gas reduction sub-element, the planning work, what's the time frame for that, and how close would that come to my vision of you just come with a wall chart that says in 18 months we're here, or we narrow all the streets, or, you know, right?
Well, that would probably be up to you all about those types of
the specific actions. But
yeah.
When do you come and say you'd have to cut individual consumption by 1/3 in the next 18? When do we get to that, or are we no longer? I mean, are we no longer aiming for this 45% of the 2015 or whatever it was?
So we're working towards that net zero by 2040, which is more aggressive than the 45% interim regional goal. And what we're doing to get there is we completed the carbon wedge analysis last year. So that analysis of greenhouse gas reduction scenarios that could get us as close to our goals as possible. And all of that is going to be integrated into the goals that we set as a part of our greenhouse gas reduction sub-element with the comprehensive plan update. And so with that, we're coming up with some, I don't want to say really specific, relatively specific activity targets that say things like reduce energy use in buildings across the city X% by this year in order to achieve those goals. So we will have these goalposts that tell us if in these different sectors, if we are meeting that or if we're not meeting that. And so we have that analysis done. We're fine tuning it a little bit, and that's gonna be a part of the greenhouse gas reduction sub-element that comes forward as a part of the comprehensive plan update. It will then be up to us as a city, though, to hold ourselves accountable to it in order to achieve those goals and make it happen.
Thank you, Pam. So within a year, we should see that those sub-element charts developed and integrated into the comprehensive plan proposal with milestones along the way that we can identify.
Yeah, we'll have a 2030, 2040, and 2050 milestone.
Thank you.
The tough questions. I have at the top of my paper, accountability strategies. Councilmember Vanderpool.
Yeah, so I appreciate Councilmember Gilman's urgency, because there's a ton of urgency behind this. I mean, a lot. And so one of the things I actually was just thinking about as going through the question about, you know, the significancy of funding, significancy of getting there. You know, I know the state has created a cap and trade system, part of the Climate Commitment Act. I'm wondering how much of that is going to be used to help us get to those much more expensive goals that we need to do. I'm very curious how much of that we've considered in the process.
We're looking very closely at all of that, and we have quite a bit of funding applications out there in order to access some of that funding to implement these different programs. It's the planning grant that we got for the comprehensive plan update for the climate element, which is helping to support one of those project-based staff positions, is partly funded by the Climate Commitment Act by grant dollars made available through that. And then we've got several other grant applications out right now. The dollars from that program, though, are just starting to flow. Really, late last year is when we first saw grants applications coming out for us to be able to apply for to access some of that funding. So we hope to see some more of it soon. We're tracking it as closely as possible, that and federal grant funds, to make sure we're able to access that funding wherever we can.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be quick because we still have an executive session to get to. I almost said Clark. Councilmember Gilman already asked you the questions about accountability strategy, so I'll just move along. I do have a question about Energize Olympia's numbers in the heat pumps. So we did 67 for last year, and I was going to ask you, are we on track? But it sounds like we're not started yet. So did we start around the same time as last year?
Last year's program started a bit sooner. It launched in, I think, May.
Okay.
So we'll be launching this year, most likely in August. We're just waiting on a couple of final contracts to come through for our installation partners that are the ones who then install the contracts. You'll notice I said installation partners, not installation partner this year. We are trying to double the installation number for this year, and so we need to work with more installers to make that happen.
I see. Okay. I'm curious about, you had a slide up there about adapting existing goals and developing new goals. So is this, I don't mean to imply anything negative, but is this sort of back to accountability strategies? Is this sort of a way of usurping what we said we were supposed to do, and then now we're pivoting to? So could you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll go back to I think this is the slide that you're thinking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this, no, it's not. This is about developing very specific climate resilience goals and policies. Right now, we don't have any. There are some climate resilience related goals that are kind of scattered throughout other city plans and other comprehensive plan chapters. But as a city, we've never taken a really big picture look at what are our climate risks and what are our resilience goals for adapting to them. for the greenhouse gas reduction sub-element, we're just going to pull through those same goals that we've already been talking about with council and then just pull those into the comprehensive plan. So not setting anything new there.
I see. I was just hoping you weren't saying, like, we'll just move the goalposts.
No,
Okay.
no. In fact, we got to do more faster now in order
Okay.
to meet those same goals.
Yes. Thank you. I'm curious if you, about the private sector. And the reason I ask this is because as an equity practitioner, I'm paying attention to what the private sector is doing with DEI policy. And I'm curious about whether or not there's something similar happening with the private sector when it comes to climate. Tractor Supply, for example, recently had a statement that said that they were, along with eliminating their DEI program and initiatives, they are also going to withdraw their carbon emission goals and focus on land and water conservation, which I'm not sure how you can separate those things out. But I'm just curious about our private sector, this is a global collaboration. So I'm just curious about if you're seeing anything similar to what we're seeing in the equity profession.
Yeah, it's a bit all over the place, I'd say. You have some private sector companies that are really doubling down and saying we're really committed to getting this work done and finding ways to go further faster. You have some private sector companies that have goals that people might call questionable. Are they actually really meeting that the way they say they're meeting that? So those are big questions. But then we also have, there are a piece of our private sector that are not on board with this work. They feel like it is an existential threat to their business model, and they're deeply concerned about that, and that's very real. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. We talk about a just transition. So what does a just transition look like in our community here in Olympia? What does a just transition look like kind of beyond that? And in that, we're really talking about the folks who have been who experience kind of disproportionate harm from environmental harms. But we're also talking about folks who work in industries that are currently supported by or entirely dependent on fossil fuels. And what does a just transition look like for those individuals as well, and making sure they are able to really come along as a part of our transition to a renewable energy and a decarbonized economy. One of the things that I didn't get into, one of the things that we're working on with our home energy score disclosure policy is also developing, well, what does a supporting program look like to make that happen? And so that's one of those examples where there's a lot of opportunities for also new jobs and new job training. And so we're talking with local partners about that, right? In order to do a home energy score assessment, you need home energy score assessors. We don't really have those right now in Olympia. I mean, we have some, but not at the scale we would need. So what does it look like to create those jobs, help folks get trained to do that work? And so it's really looking at that as part of the bigger picture.
I see. Thank you. It's just very alarming, and so I'll be watching just to see if there's more of a trend in that direction, because obviously we can do what we can, but we need everybody else to play as well. So existing buildings, obviously we know that this is one of the most significant contributing factors. So where are we in I know we talked about this previously, so where are we in our understanding of how we might retrofit or convert existing buildings?
So Energize Olympia is an example of one of those programs where we're working on that. We're also working on developing, this is another project in partnership with the housing team on developing what we're calling like a rental decarbonization accelerator that's focused very specifically on rental buildings and more specifically affordable rental housing, and working to develop custom decarbonization plans with building owners and with tenants and help them connect to funding including some of the new state and federal funding that's available to decarbonize those buildings. We're working on developing, I apologize, a pilot plan for how to implement that. But we want to work out the kinks before we go really big with that. And so we're hoping to launch a pilot plan for that next year. And that's in active progress, where we'd be working with a handful of building owners to see how does it go to work with them to develop this plan, these custom plans that are, rental buildings are tricky. You've got landlords, you've got tenants. They're often really large. They're really complicated, right? How do you do energy efficiency retrofits in those buildings? So really taking that on a building by building approach. The other thing that we're working on is right now, it's just really hard for us to track retrofits within our existing buildings. We know what's going on with new buildings because we know what the building code says. But it's really hard for us to track when people are doing energy efficiency upgrades and when they're doing electrification retrofits. A lot of that information comes through our permit process, but it's not currently tracked in a way that, it's not inputted in a way that allows us to easily quantify that at the end of a month or the end of a year to say, where is that going? So we are working on exploring that and making some changes there so we can at least kind of get a sense of where we are. What is the current rate of retrofits that we're seeing within our building stock, and how does that compare to what we know we need to be hitting annually in order to get to those greenhouse gas reduction goals?
Thank you. And it's okay that you got another pilot program coming. We're a small government trying to do our part in our small corner of the world, so it's okay. Thank you. All right. Well, I don't have any other questions, so just thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Good night. All right, so that concludes our business items for this evening. We will move on to council reports because we skipped them last week and we promised that we would get to them this week. So I'll just start with a brief mayor's report, which is in addition to the several other, several community events that I've attended over the last few weeks, I delivered the first of what I can imagine will be many presentations on the budget to senior services last week. And so it was very interesting to hear a lot about some of their concerns. Most of them were more general issue concerns, things like the rising cost of housing, things like addressing homelessness, things of that nature. I think that they were a bit taken aback by the wealth of information that they were getting, so I think they needed to sit with that, if I'm being honest. But overall, I think I'll be out and about on a tour presenting this information as much as possible in anticipation of next year's budget. So, yeah, stay tuned. And I will start to my right with Councilmember Madrone.
Great, and we haven't done reports in a while, so I'm just going to go for like little tidbits of things that I think you guys will think are interesting. At the last RHC meeting, one of the things that we went over and reviewed is a matrix of all the affordable housing incentives that each of the jurisdictions is doing all in one place. It's in draft form, but that's going to be very useful for us to really step into that policy space as a regional body and like how we work on policy together. And we did talk about doing a strategic retreat to really start working on policy rather than just funding recommendations. And also at our next meeting, we will be talking about the grants pass decision and our regional approach to that. I believe the city manager will be joining for that meeting. So I'll have more on that later. I'm going to be forwarding an invitation to all of you from the Thurston Conservation District. They're doing a series of garden celebrations at our tiny home villages. One is at Quint Street on August 19th. One is on Plum Street, August 24th. 21st, one's at Franz Anderson, August 27th. These are 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And they said, see what's growing in the gardens and how it's lifting up communities. We're going to be asked to help serve food and then share a meal with the residents of the communities there with food that was grown in the gardens. And this is just one part of the partnership that we have with the Thurston Conservation District. Thurston Regional Planning Council met. One of the things that we talked about is now that we have grown up into a transportation management area, which means our population has gotten to the size where we need to be doing some extra things as a regional jurisdiction. One of those is developing a congestion management process, and there was some conversation there where there had been a proposal to remove the safety as a focus area because we're focusing on safety in other areas, like developing a regional transportation safety plan, but both based on a recommendation from the Transportation Policy Board and ultimately from TRPC, we are actually going to keep safety as the first focus area for that. The point that I made is that talking about safety in transportation is like talking about equity anywhere else. Like it should be a part of every single thing that we are doing, and sometimes redundancy and doing things several times over and using different sets of data actually leads to better results. So, and also we have a potential of getting some redistributed funds for the Phones Road project. It's currently in there for, so essentially, not everybody spent their transportation dollars. There's extra money out there. We could potentially capture some of that for the Phones Road project and free up some transportation dollars within our own budget. So we'll find out after Labor Day. And then finally, yesterday there was I'll do this since Jim's not here tonight. There was a final in-person meeting for the ILA for Deschutes Estuary Restoration. So this is all of the jurisdictions coming together to turn an MOU into an ILA that talks about how we're going to be working together in the future on a few things, but the biggest component of it is ongoing sediment management. It was a really great meeting. We are on a really excellent track, and I know that at some point, we are going to be, DES will be coming in here and presenting on the ILA for us to vote on. They're doing some final tweaks based on the meeting that we had yesterday, but like good energy in the room, and really, really excited to have this come forward to the council. Those are my reports.
October 1st, they'll be here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Madrone? All right, Councilmember Vanderpool.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little detail about the Transportation Policy Board. I'm going to skip over the congestion management process because similar thing earlier in the week. It was kind of weird. We were before you this time, and then you guys were like a couple days later. We also flatly felt kind of just, we rejected it on the grounds that safety has to be part of the whole transportation process. We're going to, there's a state legislative subcommittee between the two boards that I volunteered to, so that there would be someone from Olympia regarding the transportation funding request to the legislature. So probably hear more about that later in the fall when we meet. So we also got an update on the I-5 Nisqually Delta. At this point, the plan that WashDOT gave is that they're going to build a new bridge over that whole Delta area from kind of where the East Lacey urban growth area all the way to where it gets right to Pierce County. So it's going to be a fairly large project. They're going to add 2 high occupancy vehicle lanes, which are the lanes for multiple drivers. We did have some concerns around environmental impact, if the lane would do anything regarding helping traffic, and we got kind of a vague answer from WashDOT around that. I noticed that if you look at the map of the area, the very end of the line that Sound Transit owns for the heavy rail use for the Sound commuter ends and merges right where that bridge is. And I asked WashDOT if this bridge would fall would they consider any capacity for heavy rail in the future? And they kind of told us that, that's not really their concern, that if Sound Transit wanted to do it, that they can do it, to me and to a lot of our members, we kind of feel that WashDOT is just not really concerning itself with public transportation. They're really seeing it from a point of, we do highways, private and local does public transportation. And so that was kind of it feels like they're going to try to move forward with a very expensive piece of infrastructure that isn't really considering the future of what could be rail. And so that was most of the Transportation Policy Board. And then a couple other items. I did go to the Thurston County Chamber, 150-year Port Plaza. It was nice to see business owners, and it was nice to see members of the public and other elected officials and people from the area kind of just meeting and talking about all the things that the chamber does and all its history, and that was a pretty cool event to visit with. On Saturday, I did go down to the Parcel of Plymouth project where the voting started, and there was some musicians. It was good to see members of the community out, even though it was very hot out. I will say I did vote for my favorite piece, and it was very hard to choose this year because there's a lot of excellent pieces of art this year. So if you haven't done that yet, please do.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Vanderpool? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
These are all comments. The first one, you started with what you were going to skip over, and I don't think you skipped over it. And also, I am so, I just really smile when you give your reports, even though sometimes they be long. Is that you are clearly so enthusiastic and so dug into the council work, and it's just been like 7 months, 6 or 7 months.
Oh, yeah.
And I love seeing it, and I love knowing that you're probably gonna be at every community event, and I've seen you so much, and that so thanks for joining us, thanks for digging in, thanks for doing the work, and to you and Councilmember Madrone, thanks for saying no, safety must be first.
It could be longer. I could make it longer.
We must respect people's time.
Yes. Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Well, I'll just say I have been out in the community, witnessed the people I've been bringing back in to make public comment. And I'm intrigued that we're having to create a congestion plan, because maybe it's only my experience, but I think I can turn left at 5 p.m. from any arterial in the city of Olympia. So maybe someday there'll be congestion.
Okay.
We've got to keep moving along.
Okay. I'll keep it.
All right. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Gilman?
Except Robert.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I just have one thing. Please feel free to ask me what I've been up to if you're curious, or about community livability and public safety. Though, sans any questions, I just wanted to bring up that I know a little bit ago we had a public commenter come in and was interested in possibly exploring a sister city with Nigeria. And myself and the city manager did have a follow-up conversation with them today. I certainly didn't feel it was my role to speak for council, especially since we haven't come to a consensus on this one yet. But I was very always hoping to be respectful, but then also honest about my thoughts on what our capacity would be right now to take on another sister city, to which our very enthusiastic and determined community member said, "That's great. You got to do what you got to do, and I'm not stopping. This will happen." So I think that with that, it makes me wonder, what is the appetite, and this is not a question for right now, but what is the appetite of council members for taking on new sister cities in general? So hoping to have some conversation about that. I would welcome sharing it whenever we're ready. Also, sharing it publicly too, so folks know. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for the Mayor Pro Tem? Councilmember Vanderpool.
The answer is yes.
Thank you. I look forward to having a conversation.
So, this is more like a comment. I'm not concerned with strong arming this council by sharing my position, because I know you all, I'm one of 7 of equals. And my opinion on this is one that, frankly, we're in the middle of budget conversations, serious budget conversations. We have a small $5,000 budget for our existing relationship with Kato Japan. And now they have access to some Inspire Olympia dollars, which is great. But other than that, it doesn't go much beyond that. And we could do more to enhance our relationship. In fact, in our agreement, there are many things about economic development and tourism and things like that that we have not achieved with our 40-year relationship with Kato Japan. And so I frankly am not sure why we would entertain bringing additional relationships at this point, or even so much as establishing a process for developing more relationships, because I think that we're having tough conversations about the budget. That's one reason. In addition to that, we're talking about the values of other nations that we would form these relationships with. And so far from some of the nations that have been proposed to develop these diplomatic relationships with, they are not nations that, frankly, as an openly gay mayor, that I would feel comfortable going over and shaking hands with the government of Nigeria. So I think that there is some real conversations that we need to be having about what kinds of cities we would be interested in forming these partnerships with, but I also think that we need to be realistic about the time in which we would be considering doing this, and also doing our part to continue to carry forward our existing relationship with Kato. So those are my thoughts on that, and I don't anticipate that they will change. City Manager Bernie.
I have nothing to report.
All right. Am I on?
Nope.
Okay, there we go. All right, so that concludes council reports. So at this time, we will recess for 5 minutes and convene in room 423 for an executive session pursuant to a personnel matter. No decisions will be made, and we will meet for up to 90 minutes in room 423. It is now 9:21. And after the executive session, we will be adjourned for the evening.